We are in location. We are in location. That was weird. We are in location. That was weird. People can hear me. So how can they? But it's just delayed. Yeah. So how can they? But it's just delayed. Okay, we'll figure that out. Okay. Okay. All right. So everyone's now awake, right? You. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Um. So Phillipsburg. Sounds like you guys brought in some food labels too. So I think we're working on getting those transferred up to the screen so we can take a look at those. So while we're seeing if we can do that for the Phillipsburg group, we're going to take a look at a couple others. We've got Jello. Actually, we have two types of Jello here. We've got, both are sugar-free. So being sugar-free, what's the first thing that we think of? Sugar substitutes. Yes. And then what's the other thing that the other thing I want you to sort of think about is what is the company trying to do? Who are they trying to target? Correct. People who are looking to lose weight and or have diabetes. So they're basically targeting you. Okay, so let's see what's in this now. I'm going to actually take the black cherry one. So here we go. We got gelatin. We've got adipic, disodium phosphate, comma, fumaric acid for tartness, maltodextrin, natural flavors, which to be honest, guys, that is something I don't understand. I'm always like, what is a natural flavor? Okay. It contains 2% less of aspartame. What is aspartame? Sugar substitute. Yes. And what did we sort of learn about sugar substitutes yesterday? Are they considered safe? Yes, they are. They're under the category of GRAS. We are concerned if they're consumed in excessive amounts. We have studies that do show that they're damaging on that end. But how many people are going to eat like 100 packets of Jell-O in a day? Very few, right? However, what is something that we are seeing? We are seeing that it is probably messing with what's called the microbiome, and that does inherently change how we metabolize energy and glucose. So there is some negativity on that too. Plus, it's incredibly sweet, isn't it? 500 to 1,000 times sweeter than what sugar actually is giving you. So your tolerance could potentially change on your threshold of sweetness. All right, we've got red 40, and then we've got sulfame potassium, another sugar substitute, salt, blue 1, and that's it. Okay. Would I want to consume this? Me? Do you think I would want to? You wouldn't. No? But why would you? Why would you? Right? I wouldn't recommend it. What's another option? What do you think? Fruit. That's a great option. Definitely. Actual cherries. What if you made a black cherry cake yourself and then you had a small bite? Would that almost satisfy you more than this? I don't know. That's up to you. But I think we just have to change I think there needs to be a paradigm shift, a change in thought on what's considered good for you or not good for you. That's just kind of, I want to sort of challenge you today about that. Okay, great. So let's take a look at this one. So now we have, it looks like just a rice blend. It's white, brown, wild, and red rice. Okay, perfect. So this has white rice, brown rice, red rice, wild rice. That's it. What do we think? Would this be considered a whole food? Yes, it definitely would. These are true foods. Is this something that the Lord made for us? Yeah, it is. Yeah, it does contain, so let's see, for a third of a cup, that would be not cooked. So 1/3 cup not cooked. If we were to cook that with water, how many cups would that make us? Like 2/3 cup cooked. So we're looking at a little bit less than a cup here, if you all can kind of visualize that. So that's going to give us 29 grams of carbohydrates. Reasonable, definitely reasonable. For a lot of women, they need about 45 to 60 grams in a meal. For men, about 60 to 75 is appropriate. I just recommend people definitely not consume more than 100 grams at one time. That's just not good really for anybody. Does that make sense, guys? Is this a feasible thing to include within your meal? Yes, isn't it? Yay! Okay, great. Okay, we'll look at this one, and then hopefully we can maybe get, I don't know if we can get those later. Okay, perfect. So this is freeze-dried strawberry and banana. Okay, so this has got banana slices and strawberry slices. That's it. What do we think? Yes, I think that this is a great option if you're trying to get some fruit in. It doesn't have any added sugar, so this is a great label. I actually might pass this around because what it's showing you is that the total sugar is 5 grams, but there's no added sugar in that 5 grams, right? So that 5 grams is from the fruit itself. Does that make sense, guys? So that might be fun just for y'all to look at that and really see that difference. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Okay, perfect. So that's not a bad option, I would say. Definitely not. All right. Do we have some other ones we can maybe pull up? Oh, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Nathan. Okay. So I'm not sure what, oh, it looks like it's a yogurt. Okay, key lime Greek yogurt. Key lime Greek yogurt. Okay, perfect. So let's take a look at this. I actually like to look at ingredients lists before I go to the food label itself. And we were just talking about this in this group over here. Do you need me to move that? Yes. We were just talking. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for telling me. But food companies are, again, smart, aren't they? And they know how to create their food to where it fits within the particular recommendations on a food label. So that's why I almost say you might look at the ingredients first before you move over to the food label itself. So let's do that today on this one. So what's the first thing we have here? What is that? Okay, so the first thing in here is sugar. And what does that also mean? So when you're looking at the list of things that are in a food product, what's the first one mean? The most is in it, right. So what's the next thing we have? Okay. Wow. All right. Now we've got water, and then we have, it looks like some cornstarch, natural flavor. Again, who knows what that means? Carrageen, potassium sorbate to maintain freshness, malic acid, sodium citrate, annatto extract, and vitamin D3. So would this be considered a whole food? No. Okay, great. So let's go back over here. Now let's look at the nutrition facts itself. So one container, 130 calories, that's fine. The saturated fat, what do you think about that? That's great. Yeah, no problem there. Sodium, good, very low in sodium. Total carbohydrate is 20 grams. That's not bad at all, is it? Really, it isn't. But what does this now really tell you? What are you learning from this label? How much added sugar? It says 19. We actually don't know. This is kind of an old label, actually. So this is, this label was before the regulations came out that they had to show added sugars. So it's not shown on this one. So we can't tell how much of that 19 grams of sugar is added or natural. Does that make sense, guys? But what would you guess, knowing the first two ingredients in the label? It's pretty high in added sugars. My guess would be at least 15 grams of added sugars. So, recap. For women, do we kind of remember how many grams women should have a day in added sugar? I'll remind you, it's 30. You guys kind of remember that. For men, 45. But children, what is children? 15 to 20, right? Great. So this would be a product I wouldn't recommend either for that. Yes. Absolutely. So generally, great question. So generally, if it's plain, what does that mean? They don't have flavorings to it. Guys, the food industry are always the ones going to put more sugar, more salt, more added fat than you would in your own food inherently. It just will. So that is what I recommend. I recommend getting plain Greek yogurt. I don't know if I have, sometimes I have one, but the brand I do recommend is called Fage. It's Fage. Do you guys ever seen that before? That is my favorite brand just because it has an excellent carbohydrate to protein ratio. I like it because it's thick and creamy, and then I'll add, like, again, my own granola to it and berries and nuts and stuff like that. So it's actually not that much better. It's just from like a protein standpoint, it actually contains more protein because it's strained. So that's why it's just thicker. Yeah. But they have about the same. It's just from that aspect. Great question. Yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, the very same thing as this. It's probably something that's designed for that population. Yeah, I would prefer people to have just plain yogurt and then add things to it themselves. Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes. Okay. Yes. So yeah. I'm trying to retrain myself to do that. I'm not used to it. No, it's my fault. So they asked the question on Carb Master, like what we thought about Carb Master. And I believe we'd have to look at that label specifically. I have done it in the past, but it's probably similar to something like this. It's just something that's been designed. So that's that food designer term to fit the need of that target population. But yeah, plain yogurt is what I would recommend. And the nice thing about plain yogurt, I don't want to talk too much about nutrition. We've got other stuff to do today, but I just, fun thing to think about, you can use it in all of your cooking. So like that's another reason why I get plain. Is that if I make guacamole, I'll put that in my guacamole versus sour cream. If I make like tuna salad or chicken salad, I'll use that in place of mayonnaise. If I make salad dressings or if I bake, sometimes I use it in my muffins or just a variety of ways. So just kind of another rationale for that too. Generally. Dang it. I really appreciate that. Yes. So Carb Master sounds like you can get it at Dylan's. Her question was, would you substitute the same amount of sour cream or mayonnaise for Greek yogurt? And the answer is yes. If you're not comfortable with that, if you're like, oh, I don't know about that, you could definitely do halvesies, and that's definitely on the right direction. So, okay. Okay, should we do another label or should we move on? Yeah. Okay.
So I can pull them up here on your phone. You can just talk about them if you would like to, for their sake. If you want to just show the picture of it there, and then she can talk about it for just a second.
Okay, I'll do that. And then, okay, perfect.
This one is Heinz ketchup.
Ooh, fun. Oh, the only problem is it's not showing all the ingredients on that picture. So I can kind of, okay, so this one's Heinz ketchup. Who likes ketchup? Love it. Listen, my husband is notorious for consuming lots of ketchup. Back in the day, not now, right? But anyway, okay, so this one's obviously, you can't see this, but I'll just tell you the ingredients. It's cut off, but it looks like it's tomato concentrate from tomatoes, distilled vinegar, and high fructose corn syrup. Okay, this label is, so what's high fructose corn syrup? Sugar. I won't have time to talk about that. Moving on. From the label, it looks like there's no saturated fat. The sodium's actually kind of high. It's 7% of the daily value for a tablespoon. So I would call that a relatively high sodium product, just from the standpoint of the amount in that amount. Like 1 tablespoon is not that much. Total carbohydrates is 5 grams here, and then the sugar is 4. This is also another old label. It does not show the added sugar content under that total sugar. So we'll just have to guess on how much is in there. But considering the third ingredient is high fructose corn syrup, I would also guess it's definitely in there in some capacity. So, okay, great. Awesome. Should you have ketchup? Yeah, you can have ketchup. I think you just have to be informed that it is a little high in salt and that it is a little high in added sugar. And so you just might keep that in mind if you're consuming it, and just thinking about what you're consuming it with. Right. Right. Not your nice homemade turkey burger from home with your own little, fruits out. Got it. Yep. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on. So today we have a lot more to cover. Being active, medication, monitoring, reducing risk, problem solving, healthy coping. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about being active. Medication, we're going to just spend a little time on. I'm not going to talk in depth about medication, mostly because there are so many options. It's a little overwhelming. So we're going to talk about the different classifications and kind of maybe a stepwise approach depending on where you are. I've actually got some questions about that this morning already, so we can kind of go back to those. But why are we going to spend more time talking about being active? Do we remember what the 3 therapies are, guys? Okay, absolutely. And again, just coming from the crowd, so how many of you guys have been to a doctor and they've said, hey, you've got to move more? And you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? And how can I do that? So let's go ahead and talk about that first and foremost. So I'm going to show a video. It's a little YouTube video. It's called 23 and a half hours. It's just fun. It's kind of fast. So if you want to watch it again, the link is in your booklets today. But it's interactive. It's a physician who has basically put together this fun illustration of the current research and what we know about being active. So it's called 23 and a half hours, okay? So let's watch that first.
Visual lecture I'm calling 23 and a half hours. So I have a big interest in preventive medicine, which can mean a lot of things from, cancer screening to eating more fiber to having a good social network. And Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Evans, and welcome to this visual lecture I'm calling 23 and a half hours. So I have a big interest in preventive medicine, which can mean a lot of things from, cancer screening to eating more fiber to having a good social network. And I mean that in the old sense of the word. Weighing less, drinking less, smoking less, controlling your blood pressure, cholesterol, and so on and so forth. So all of these things are incredibly important, and I wouldn't want you to minimize your efforts in any one category, but I want to know what comes first. What has the biggest impact? What has the biggest return on investment? What makes the biggest difference to your health? So I did my research, and I found an answer, at least for me, and it's tricky because all these things are sort of overlapping. But I picked out this intervention, and because of its breadth, it worked for so many different health problems, and that's what I found so cool about it. So just to kind of walk you through a quick list. So this intervention in patients with knee arthritis who receive 1 hour of treatment 3 times a week reduced their rates of pain and disability by 47%. In older patients, it reduced progression to dementia and Alzheimer's by around 50%. for patients at high risk of diabetes, and coupled with other lifestyle interventions, it reduced progression to frank diabetes by 58%. Postmenopausal woman who had 4 hours a week of the treatment had a 41% reduction in the risk of hip fracture. It reduced anxiety by 48% in a big meta-analysis. Patients suffering from depression, 30% were relieved with low dose, and that bumped to 47% as we increased the dose. Following over 10,000 Harvard alumni for over 12 years, those that had the intervention had a 23% lower risk of death than those who didn't get the treatment. It's the number one treatment of fatigue, and of course, the kind of outcome of choice, or my favorite outcome, is quality of life, which is really all of the above and really about making your life better. And this treatment has been shown over and over again to improve quality of life. So the question is, what's the medicine, and what is 23 and a half hours? So the medicine was exercise, mostly walking, so not triathlons. And let me just put it a different way. I think what I'm asking you to do is, if you think about your typical day, so there's 24 hours, and so you might spend most of your day, this varies obviously, but couch surfing, sitting at work, obviously sleeping. And what the evidence that I'm going to show you kind of tells me is the best thing you can do for your health is to spend half an hour being active, maybe an hour, and that if you can do that, you can realize all the benefits I've described in the previous slides. So let's just take a quick walk through some of the literature. So Stephen Blair, he's a professor at the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina, and he looked at this in what's called the Aerobic Center Longitudinal Study, which followed over 50,000 men and women over time. And along the left side of this graph is something called attributable fractions, which is a kind of fancy word, but it's the estimate of the number of deaths in a population that would have been avoided if that specific risk factor had been erased. So, for example, turning a smoker into a non-smoker, or a couch potato into a daily walker. And along the bottom is the typical risk factors. You can see the hypertension is incredibly important, and so on and so forth. But the one that kind of applied the most risk was this sort of mysterious CRF, which is cardiorespiratory fitness, which is really low fitness. So low fitness was the strongest predictor of death. And this is important. That most of the trials we see, to be honest, are funded by pharma or other companies because they've got a drug for hypertension or high cholesterol or diabetes, and we rarely see fitness thrown into the mix. And so it's nice to see a trial that's not so siloed. Blair's work is interesting. He also did another trial looking at obesity. What he found was, sort of two things. One is obesity and no exercise. That's a very bad combination, and that's where we saw many of the negative consequences of obesity from a health point of view. But if the obese person was active, even if they didn't have the weight loss, but were just active and obese, that was much, much better, and that the exercise ameliorated much of the negative consequences of obesity. So if exercise is a medicine, what's a dose? So when I think of dose, I think of how long, how often, and how intense. I'm going to give you a slightly mixed message, but essentially more activity is better. But I must say the rate of return seems to decline after 20 or 30 minutes a day. So if you're being active less than 150 minutes a week, or more if you're a kid, an hour a day if you're a kid, my flag goes up in the clinic. So my personal take on this is that the literature draws a very broad brush, and so we see big differences when somebody goes from not doing anything to doing something, and after that the return is more granular. So if we took the Nurses' Health Study, women who went from zero activity to just 1 hour a week reduced their heart disease rates by almost half. So you can break it down, so it can be 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes if you want to do 30 minutes of exercise, so it can be broken into 3. Higher intensity, it looks like it's equivalent to less time with lower intensity. But I think obviously the clinical pearl is mostly thinking about your style and habits and your personal cues. So if you're only going to do it if it's pre-booked with friends, I have couples that take a half-hour walk every morning or evening to organize their life. A dog is a great walking coach. The data showing 67% of dog walkers achieved 150 minutes a week just with the dog walking. And finally, of course, your commute, getting off stop early, taking the stairs, and so on and so forth. So thinking about that, I'm just going to walk you through some quick slices of the literature. The first one comes from Japan. In the 90s, Japan required all employers to conduct annual health screenings for their employees. And so a large gas company in Japan called Osaka used this to answer a great question. So if people's walk to work was longer, did that reduce their chance of serious health problems? So in this example, high blood pressure. And what they found is under 10-minute walk, no difference. 11 to 20-minute walk, 12% reduction in rates of high blood pressure or hypertension. And over 21-minute walk, a 29% decrease in rates of high blood pressure. So the authors calculated that for every increase of 10 minutes in your walk to work, there was a 12% reduction in the likelihood of getting high blood pressure. The second exhibit is looking at stents. So this is something we commonly do down medicine. So you can see on the left here, the artery's blocked. On the right, a vascular surgeon's gone in and put in a balloon, opened it up, and left a stent to keep it open, which makes great sense. So a German researcher named Rainer Hambrecht looked at this with about 100 cardiac patients. He got half the group to exercise, and by that I mean 20 minutes a day on an exercise bicycle and then once weekly 60-minute aerobics class. And the other half got the high-tech stent and just their sort of normal activity. And after 1 year, 88% of the exercises were event-free compared to 70% of the people that got a stent. So both worked, but I find it sort of incredible that the low tech made a bigger difference. And you have to remember that the stent just fixes one part of the heart. The next way to think about it is the reverse. So what I call sitting disease. We know that being sedentary is bad for your health, but a researcher named Leonard Veerman wanted to quantify this, and he did so down in Australia in a big study they did there. They found, compared with persons who watch no TV, those that spend a lifetime average of 6 hours a day watching TV can expect to live about 5 years left. I mean, that's incredible. But then I think, who watches 6 hours a day of TV? And it turns out the average adult in the USA spends about 5 hours a day watching TV or screens. So I find this fascinating that we never think of the TV as something that's bad for our health, but clearly it's as powerful as many other risk factors for chronic disease. So I'm just going to leave you with, I guess, two quotes. So one is Jerry Garcia, the singer who is the lead singer for the Grateful Dead, and he said, somebody has to do something. It's just incredibly pathetic that it has to be us. And I think that's true, that in some ways it has to be us. As Hippocrates said, walking is man's best medicine. And so I'm going to finish by asking you a question. And this may have some personal challenges for you. So, you might be very busy with work or kids or both, and you may be in pain or have other priorities. But my question to you is, can you limit your sitting and sleeping to just 23 and a half hours a day? So something to think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, right. So for Phillipsburg people, we are taking a break in moving our arms and getting up every 30 minutes to stretch and just kind of get our body going. That is perfect. Whenever you're ready, you are welcome to go ahead and sit back down. Okay, so pretty fun video. Hopefully it sort of changed your perspective on getting some activity in and being sedentary or just sitting for 23 and a half hours. In your booklets, you're going to notice that there is a particular slide that has the percentages that he talked about initially. Did you guys see that slide? Okay, so let's go over those. If you can do one action, and this would reduce knee arthritis by how much? 47. Great. It can actually reduce the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's by 50%. Yes. That's my timer to make sure that we stand, but we did that. Hold on. I'm going to set it for another 30 minutes. Okay, great. I think people have this idea that if you have dementia or Alzheimer's in your family, you are just sort of bound to potentially get it. But we do know that through these lifestyle habits, we actually can reduce some of these risk factors. And even moving is associated with better brain health. We talked about this yesterday, reducing the progression from pre-diabetes to actual diabetes. If we can get this activity in, how much can we reduce that by? 58%. Good. We can reduce the risk of hip fracture by 41. Great. We can reduce anxiety by, perfect, and depression by 30. If you increase the dose, meaning you get a little bit more in, 47% is what he cited there. Who feels better mentally, physically, when you go out and do some kind of activity? Anybody gonna feel that? Yeah. So we know it's effective. So walking is the safest, most effective way to get in that activity and improve your quality of life. Sort of the clinical pearl here, or like the key message, is do something you enjoy. While walking is the safest method, if it's not your cup of tea, that's fine. You know, if you like something different, then do that, whether it's dancing. I have one patient in my home clinic that plays pickleball. Do you guys know what pickleball is? Okay, never mind. Some people do. But it's basically like this miniature form of tennis. It's really fun, super cute. And she plays that every day. That is like her thing. Or just regular tennis, or if you play with your grandkids, you know, however you want to get that out, make it fun too. So what is the recommendation? So this is for general health. I want to be clear, this is not for weight loss. This is for general health. We're looking for 150 minutes per week, or basically about 30 minutes 5 times out of the week. That is what we're looking for. Ideally, if we can get to moderate to vigorous activity, that is also what we're looking for. So how do you know if you're getting there? Moderate to vigorous. So there's kind of two thoughts. The first is, if you are doing the activity and you can talk, but you cannot sing a song, you're probably doing something that's moderate to vigorous, okay? The other thing you can do is monitor your heart rate. And we're looking for it to be 50 to 70% higher than your baseline heart rate, okay? So how do you know what your baseline heart rate is? Well, you can just, feel your pulse and count it for 15 seconds and then multiply it to know what that baseline is. If you're cool enough to have like a watch or a Fitbit or something like that, it would usually tell you. If you go to your doctor's office, they're supposed to get your pulse, and that would be your resting pulse rate. So if you can get that number and then make it 50% higher, you will be getting into that moderate to vigorous activity. So we are looking to do this for general health. For weight loss, what do you think the guideline is for weight loss? It's 1 hour to 2 hours a day. Yes. Quite steep. So we will talk about that shortly, and that goes into metabolism and understanding that. We try not to go more than 2 days without being active or doing something. Why? Why more? What happens after 2 days of not doing something? What happens to your motivation? It just stings. So we want to maintain that by getting something in every day to every other day, just to maintain that. And then in moving every 30 minutes. Why does that guideline exist? Do you remember when I was talking about when you have high glucose in your blood, what does that do physically to that blood? What does it make it like? Syrup. All right. So if we are standing, if we're moving, what are we helping our body do? Circulate that a lot better, and we're helping things not necessarily stick within our arteries, etc. So that's why that guideline exists. Strength training. So this one's kind of, I don't know. I think people are like, what do you mean by strength training? I'm not going to do that. I don't know what that means. So I'm going to emphasize this a little bit more here in a little bit too, but we really want to do some type of strength training 2 to 3 times a week. Now that can involve actually holding weights or, cans of beans or whatever is heavy to you. So that can be a physical object you're holding, or it can be body weight driven. So it doesn't have to incorporate a weight itself, okay? So for example, if somebody was to do a squat, that is a body weight driven resistance activity. Does that make sense, guys? If you were to do a lunge, that is the same thing. Even if you were to do bicep curls like this without weights, I know it sounds silly, guys, but if you're here and you're doing a bicep curl and you are physically pushing up, you are using your muscles. That is resistance training, and we really want to get that in. Little limitations on that. If you do have eye disease that is not in check, or high blood pressure that's also not in check, you might not want to do strength training quite yet until you get approval from your doctor. Okay, aerobic activity. So kind of the only thing I want to talk about here is when you're doing that aerobic activity, so again, let's say you're going for a walk, right? So you're going for a walk, as soon as you start, are you burning calories? Yes. As soon as you stop, do you stop burning calories? Yes, you do actually, pretty much, yeah. So it's really kind of a start-stop thing, honestly. And again, kind of the key here is to do something that you enjoy, whether it's swimming or biking or, whatever you really like. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to strength training now. So we sort of talked about why it's good and how to kind of do it. But let's review a couple of things. So do y'all remember yesterday when I was talking about glucose in the blood being like quick cash? And then you've got savings accounts, right? So where are your savings accounts again? Remind me. Muscle and liver, right? Okay, so let's kind of recap that. So how many grams of carbohydrates do we store in our liver? 100. How many grams of carbohydrates do we store in our muscle cells? Close. 400 to 500. Yes. So again, if we are activating those muscles, do you not see how that's so helpful? Because we are really tapping into that storage and that savings account. And if you have extra sugar later down the road, what is it going to do? Shuttle it in the more appropriate place of your muscle cells. So at this point, I want to, draw. Let's see if we can do that. We're going to try this out, guys. Let's see how it goes. Can you guys see with me here? Is this okay for everybody? Okay. Perfect. So let's talk about metabolism. So let's see. Oh, this one. Oh, thank you. Okay, perfect. So what does metabolism mean anyway? So metabolism really is the amount of energy you produce, right? The amount of energy that you're making. I'll say energy output. Okay. All right. Did you know that there are 3 things that make up our metabolism? Okay. So the first one is what's going to be called resting metabolic rate. Anybody heard this before? Resting metabolic rate? Okay. So there's a few things that sort of influence this RMR. And the biggest one, here, I'm going to try another color. Let's see if I can do this, guys. Let's see. Is going to be genetics. Okay. This goes back to the thrifty gene hypothesis that we were talking about yesterday, doesn't it? Because, again, have humans historically lived in plethora? No. Generally, we've had to search for food and find food and store food and all these things to make sure we have a readily available food supply. And our genes have done what? They have been very good at figuring out how to keep calories in versus excreting them. So just from a genetic standpoint, that's how some people's RMR can be, let's say, hardwired. This might be a little bit more relatable. Does anybody know somebody that can eat whatever the heck they want, and it just goes through them. And you're like, what the heck? What the heck? Wait, what did you say?
You look like that.
Oh, well, you know why? Because I exercise a lot. But thank you. It's hard work for sure. Okay, so genetics. Now, some people just probably have a higher metabolism, or RMR really is what they mean when they say metabolism. And just think about that like a fire, right? So you got this fire. I did not go to art school, guys. Anyway, that's a fire. Okay, what's another thing that can influence our metabolism that we know of? Age, right? What happens when we age? That fire sort of dims a little bit, doesn't it? Okay. This one is the one I want to talk to you mostly about. So weight loss is another reason we can see RMR lower. All right. Okay, who has watched or who knows about The Biggest Loser? You guys seen that? What's it about?
There's a contest between big people that try to lose weight.
Right, so it's a contest with people who have obesity or have high body weights, and then they really see how many, pounds they can lose quickly and who can win the contest. Does anybody know what happened to the contestants after the show? Wow, good job. Great. A lot of people don't know that. Did you know that they were clinically studied? Yes. What did we learn from them? We learned that through that rapid weight loss, that their resting metabolic rate dropped by 60%. Yes. Does that make sense, guys? Here's what you got to know about this, is that as far as we're aware, now this is still obviously being researched and understood, so this thought could change, but the hypothesis right now, it's a hypothesis, is that our metabolism remains lower for the rest of our life when we go through weight loss. So, who has tried to lose weight before, then you gained it back, then you tried it again, and it felt harder the next time? It's because of this. Does that make sense, y'all? So here's a kind of an example. I'm going to try to draw this. Maybe. Well, we'll see. So 60%, well, let me do it this way. So 60% is not the norm, because obviously what those contestants were doing was also not the norm, right? So that was an extreme example. So in general, when people do lose weight, they're losing about 15% of their RMR. That's more realistic to the general public, okay? So just to kind of draw that a little bit more, let's say that we have two women. All right, and they're the same gender, right? They're the same, we're going to say they're the same age, they're the same height, they're the same weight. So we're going to assume what? We're going to assume that they need about the same amount of calories. Let's say that they need about 2,000. Is this going okay, guys? Everything good here? Okay, this is new to me. All right, so let's say that this lady happens to gain a little bit of weight. See that? And what did we learn yesterday? What's the statistic? How many pounds do people gain per year on average? 2 to 3. 2 to 3. This is stuff that just kind of happens. So perhaps she happened to be eating about, 2,200 calories. I still didn't do that right. I erased it. Oh, well. Okay. That's fine. We'll do it this way. Are you trying to go back, Nathan? Are you good?
Did you just clear it all?
I think I cleared it all.
Okay. I thought maybe I did that. I was really, really nervous.
Okay. You know what? I think you did. Well, anyway, bear with me with a really bad drawing. All right, so that's what would happen, right? So we're at this space. So she's eating 2,200 calories. This one's eating 2,000. And this woman, she looks at her friend and she's just like, well, dang it. I want to look like that again. So what does she do? She reduces her calories. Oops. And let's say that she now decides to consume 1,800. All right. And she does that fairly well. And then what happens? She will maybe lose that weight. Okay. Here's the deal. She has to continue to consume 1,800 calories to maintain that weight loss. Do y'all understand? So even though she is now the same weight as her counterpart, just like before, she still has to consciously consume less. So if they're both sitting at a table and they're both eating a plate of food, she always has to consciously eat a percentage less than her counterpart to maintain that weight loss. Does that not make sense now? Why it's such a struggle? And what else did we learn about weight loss? What does your body do? Does it fight against you, or is it like, good job, I like this? No, it doesn't like that. So your metabolism slows and all the things. Okay, so that's not great news. Most people are like, well, thanks, Julia. You just made me feel awesome about myself. So let's kind of talk about some good news. Let's go back to metabolism. So we got RMR, right? And we talked about genetics and age and weight loss. All right. So how can we influence our metabolism? How can we raise that? There you go. Activity. And specifically, putting more muscle on you than fat, right? So, because what do we know? Let's say, between men and women, who burns more calories? Why? They have more muscle, right? So this is a way that we can sort of counteract that, is by muscle building. Now, let's be clear. I'm not talking about you having to be a bodybuilder, okay? Like, that's not where we're going here. We are just talking about activating those muscles in some capacity and using them for the benefit of weight maintenance and for the benefit of glucose control, right? I'm not saying, man, I want you to, really show me how ripped you are next year. No. We're just wanting to activate that in some capacity, all right? Okay, let's go to the other two really quick. So this piece is super interesting to me. This is what's called the thermic effect of food. And we were talking about that yesterday, you and I. Yes. So this piece represents a small portion of the metabolism, about 10%, but I still think it's a really relevant piece. So let's chat about it. So what is that? Anytime you're eating food, like let's say I've got this apple, right? Got an apple, I'm eating it. What has to happen? Does my jaw have to move? Yeah. Does that cause calories? Sure does. Does my throat have to move? Yes. Does my stomach have to pulverize? Yes. What happens to the small intestine? It has to also digest. All these accessory organs come into play, the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas. All these actions go into play, and this all requires energy. So it's almost like anytime you're eating something, it's kind of like working out inside, isn't it? Which is kind of nice to think about. Here's the problem. Let's go back to our gradation. Do you remember when we were talking about gradations yesterday? Let's use oatmeal again. So let's say we have instant oatmeal, all right? How do they get it to be instant? What do? They've processed it. So they've taken some of the work away from you. So when you're consuming instant oatmeal, does your body have to do as much processing on its own than if you were to eat rolled oats? Nope. What does that do to not only blood sugar, but also the thermic effect of food, your metabolism? It's not working out inside, right? And we're going to see what? Higher blood sugar because it's already been pre-processed for you. So it's not like you have to process it. So it's so much quicker for it to get into your bloodstream. All right. A lot of times, we had this discussion, which I thought was a really interesting question. But a lot of times people say, well, is it better for me to just, eat one meal a day? Or is it better for me to fast? Or is it better for me to eat like 6 meals a day or whatever, right? So anybody heard those thoughts before? Okay, I think it's not really clear. And I think going back to the National Weight Control Registry, everyone does lose weight and or find their way on their own. However, there are statistics that we can look at. So like, for example, going back to the National Weight Control Registry, 86% of those participants eat breakfast. And not only that, they don't skip meals. It's for a reason, isn't it? Because anytime you're eating something, what are you doing? You're working out. You're using the thermic effect of food. What's the danger for people skipping breakfast and lunch? What happens at dinner time? They overeat. It's very common. And a lot of times, this is what I counsel with my patients on, is they're like, I do so well during the day. And then at night, it's like, all bets are off. It's like, well, you know what? You probably need to kind of put some of that food more towards the day itself when you're actually awake. But I want you to just be aware what the thermic effect of food is. Okay, let's talk quickly about the microbiome. So we mentioned this already, didn't we? So what's the gut bacteria? What is that microbiota? Again, that's all the trillions of bacteria that live in your GI tract. And are there more gut bacteria than there are of you? Yes, there is. And what have we kind of been seeing? That the health of this invisible organ probably makes a big difference on your health, doesn't it? So I want to talk about this when it comes to weight, because quite often I have patients come to me and they say, you know what, I really don't eat that much. I really don't. And they'll do a food diary, and sure enough, they eat a very low amount of calories. And it's like, well, I'm confused. Why are you not losing weight? This is a very low amount of calories. And I think it's a couple of things. I think it's because people's metabolism is very low. I think that they have a very high amount of adipose tissue, and they don't have any degree of muscle per se, so they have a very, very low metabolism. But I think it's about the quality of food that they're eating as well. So let's talk about that. Did you know that the composition of our microbiome can make a difference in how many calories you harvest or how many calories you excrete? Let me give you an example, okay? So let's say this was a clinical trial that was done. Let's say that we have 2 sets of mice. And this group of mice was clinically cloned to become non-obese. Y'all with me? You got this group of mice. They're not obese. You have this other group of mice, and they are cloned to be obese, okay? And because it's a clinical trial, can they control how many calories these mice are consuming? Yes, to a very tight degree, right? So that's what they're doing. And what do? They decide to do a fecal transplant. You guys ever heard of that before? No? I will. Yeah. 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 It's becoming a little bit, I think, more known. I will leave it to your imagination on how they did this. But that's what they did. They did a fecal transplant. They took feces of this obese group, inserted into the non-obese group, and what happened? Even though calorie levels did not change, they got obese. They gained weight by 30%, even though their calorie levels did not change. Why? Because our gut microbiota matters. And because the composition and the ratios and the quality and the quantity all makes a difference on how you excrete calories or inherit or keep calories in. And so that's what I'm seeing. Patients come to me and they're like, you know what, I really don't eat a lot of calories. And it's true, they don't. But what are they eating? Poor quality calories. poor quality calories that are low in fiber and that's not helping grow this colony of gut microbiota. They're eating frozen pizza. They're having, the Jimmy Dean's frozen biscuits. They're having Chick-fil-A for lunch, and they could be monitoring their calorie levels so minutely, but the quality is not there. Does that make sense, guys? So yes. Love the question. So she asked the question about probiotics. So just to be clear, how do we feed our gut microbiota? Like, what does it feed off of? So it feeds off of fiber, and it feeds off of biotics, basically. So probiotics is one of them. Most people know about probiotics. Why? Because it's food that's already been fermented, right? So you can inject a bacteria strain into a product and call it a probiotic. So it's marketable. Prebiotics is just as important, but it's not talked about because you can't sell it. Prebiotics is a food that you consume, and that inherently will be fermented in your GI tract, and that also feeds the gut bacteria. You just have to consume it in its elemental state. Do you see? This is why it's not talked about. But what foods are those? Garlic is a very good example of one. Leeks is another great example. Artichokes, ginger, and honestly, a lot of, again, our elemental foods are going to inherently turn into a prebiotic form. Does that make sense, guys? So yeah, people know a lot about probiotics, but prebiotics is just as important in feeding our gut microbiome. So I just want you to pay attention to the quality of your food because, again, that can change the composition of your gut bacteria, which will relate to how you keep calories in or excrete them. Okay, last one, physical activity. So this is the last piece to our metabolism and the one that we have the greatest control over, don't we? Right? This is the piece that we have the biggest control over. So when weight loss occurs, I'm going to put that 15% down here. And we know that this is the case. How do we keep that weight off? What's kind of the best method for keeping that weight off? The best method is through physical activity and increasing physical activity because we can therefore offset the reduction in weight loss in our RMR. Does that make sense, y'all? That is why the guideline exists that if you're looking for weight loss, we're looking to increase your activity to what? 1 to 2 hours a day. That's why it exists. Which one's more important? If somebody's trying to lose weight, which one's more important initially? Diet or exercise? Diet. Excellent. Excellent. Once you've lost weight, which one's more important for keeping that weight off? Diet or exercise? Exercise. Excellent. Excellent. So if you've lost weight, your best method to keeping it off is through really improving your physical activity. Okay, guys? All right. Was that illuminating? Interesting? Okay. Questions on this? Okay, perfect. So let's go back to that resistance exercise. So now we understand the rationale behind that, right? So if we can improve resistance exercise and or doing some type of strength training, we are not only helping our overall metabolism and our overall weight loss efforts or weight maintenance efforts, but we're, of course, improving our glucose control too. When I talked about aerobic activity, what did I say? When you start doing that activity, you're burning calories, and then when you stop burning calories, right? Not true for resistance activity. When you are doing some kind of resistance activity, you are still burning calories even after you are done working out. It depends on the intensity duration, but maybe 2 to 4 hours afterwards. So I'm going to show y'all my favorite website to kind of help get you into this mode of maybe doing strength training or aerobic. All right? Sure. We're close. Okay. Okay, so this is the website that I recommend. It is free, so that's why I like to talk about it. It's a great free resource. You don't have to pay any money for it. It's called Fitness Blender. That's the name of the website, Fitness Blender. Oh, guess what? It's time for us to stand up. Yep. Go ahead and stand up. So it's a free website. I'm going to keep talking. You guys do your thing. One of the other reasons why I love it is that it is a group of personal trainers. So it's not, again, somebody just like throwing content on the interwebs. They are a group of actual certified personal trainers. It was started by these two people, so they're husband and wife, and they have a lot of content on here. One of the reasons why I love this, I'll have you do this, Nathan, if that's okay, is they have a wonderful querying system. So you can go to workouts, that little caret, and then go to workout videos. And they have this filter system. So if you go to filters, you can, and it's sort of hard to see on this screen because it's so small, so I get that. But I just want you to understand that they have such a great platform where you can put in like how many minutes you want to do, what intensity you want to do, maybe different equipment that you have or don't have. So a lot of times, let's do this, Nathan, if you don't mind. If you can put in 10 to 15 minutes. And then let's do no equipment for equipment. And then do strength training. So if you go ahead and scroll down. So these are all the workouts that they have that are less than 15 minutes long that can incorporate a weight, or it doesn't have to. And so I just want you to understand this is a wonderful resource that you can tap into that is free to you. Excellent trainers, great querying system, and really gives you many options. If you're not ready to do a strength training exercise, you're like, you know what, I'm just going to do something that's 10 minutes or less that's getting me up and moving, they have that option. So you can even take away the strength training and you can do something that's called low impact. They have low impact workouts, and you can do even a difficulty of like 2. There you go. And so all different kinds of low impact exercises. So check it out. It's a great one. Go ahead.
You notice these pictures, almost everybody's on the floor. So
yes.
Have some where you don't have to go to the floor?
You definitely don't have to. That's a great, okay, so she asked the question, a lot of these videos are showing people on the floor. She's asking if there's another resource that doesn't include floor workouts. What I would do at that point is what's called chair exercises. You guys heard of chair exercises before? Yeah, so they don't have a lot of chair exercises on this website, which is fine. I would probably just go to YouTube and type in chair exercises and find one that kind of fits you. Yeah.
Would it be an option to do it in the bed?
Yeah,
Exercises?
that's a great idea. Absolutely. Yeah, if you can, absolutely. She asked if you could do it in like the bed with a soft surface, or if you have a yoga mat or something that feels comfortable. But some people just getting up and down is a limitation, so I understand that too. Yeah.
Well, you would remember, but as older people remember years ago, Jack LaLanne. Yeah, you know Jack LaLanne. He had where people that were handicapped or housebound and had to do things in chairs. He played back there in the 50s. And if we would have followed his advice, we'd all be skinned.
So she's talking about Jack LaLanne. I'm sorry, I'm not aware of him. But if you can find his videos, go for it. Yeah. So this goes back a little bit to our habit stacking, or really approaching, how you are managing your health looking at your overarching system. That's something I really try to press into people is you have to look at your overarching system. And you have to say, just because I want to exercise doesn't mean I will, right? That can be your goal, but we only fall to the level of our system. So if we don't have a support person around us, it maybe not be as, reachable. If you can find a support person, so who's done that before? Who's done like group exercises before? Anybody? What was beneficial about that? Okay, waiting on you, accountability, maybe a check-in, kind of makes you maybe a little bit more motivated. So group support's really, yes, group support's very helpful in that. The other thing you can look at from a system standpoint is factoring in with things that you already do. So remember I talked about habit stacking. So who watches TV in the evenings, right? If you watch TV in the evenings, this is where you could try to interweave this new behavior because it's something you already enjoy doing. That means every time there's a commercial or every time, you can set a timer like we're doing today, and every 15, 30 minutes, you can stand up and do a 10-minute fitness blender at the same time you're watching. It's up to you guys, but I just want to remind y'all, try habit stacking, get support people in, look at your overarching systems. Okay.
Can I add something?
Yes.
The community, the rec commission, they offer yoga 2 days a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And they don't yell at you. And if you I can't touch my toes. You know what I mean? And you don't have to have straight. You do whatever you can.
Yeah.
And I think it's really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I do it because I pay for the classes, so I feel like I have to go.
Uh-huh.
On Tuesdays and Thursdays, but and I like it because nobody's yelling at me. You can do it. Come on.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's that resistance.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really nice. And
Yeah.
I think it's a shame more people don't go to it.
Yeah.
Put a plug in there.
So for Phillipsburg people, she's talking about a yoga class that's actually scheduled in the community. And I think you hit a couple of things talking about that. One, she actually paid money for the classes. So there's just that background incentive of going because you've already put money towards it. So that's one. But two, more importantly, is it's scheduled. I mean, how many people pay for gym memberships and don't go? It's because it's not scheduled, but you have this scheduled event. It's built into your life. So I think that's a really wonderful suggestion. Absolutely.
Also, in addition to yoga, the Senior Center offers free exercise classes every day, 5 days a week.
Oh, really?
Like 3 or 4 times a day.
3 or 4 times.
It's exercise for 30 minutes with weights, and it's got a leader. So
Every day, that's free.
And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, after
Grab my coffee.
what's called sit and fit.
Oh, really?
Is really, it's stretching but for somebody that's got aches and pains,
That's a great thing to know. Wonderful. When is that?
my husband and I go most days.
Really?
And
Yeah.
they use weights.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is sitting.
Yeah, they have weights from 1 pound to 8 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And they have weighted, I call them sticks.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Yes.
A lot of stretching.
So they're talking about, for Phillipsburg people, they're talking about different activities that are built into the community that are free. So I'm not sure if they have something like that in that community, but it's wonderful to know that they exist definitely here. Free classes that are available to you quite often. So beautiful. And it's scheduled.
We also have the pool that has time for seniors. And you have to pay for the pool, but they have activities there. Right
Absolutely.
now they don't have the aerobic classes that they did have at the pool, but it's so much easier you're on the joints.
Then yes.
You can actually walk.
Yes. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a nice
Yes.
option.
So she's talking about aerobics in a pool setting, which is wonderful, and a lot of ladies do, or a lot of people love doing that too. Yeah. So who's done? Oh yes.
I have a question, and I want you to answer.
Okay, I will try.
Okay, if a person works every day and they climb up and down on a combine, climb up and down on a planter or drill, bend over, sit down, pulling on, hubs, putting bearings in,
Mhm.
putting swing plates in, which they weigh a couple hundred pounds.
Mhm.
That kind of work does that count as regular exercise?
Okay, so she's for Phillipsburg people. She's asking about manual labor, basically. So she's talking about an individual who is in the fields, up and down a combine, moving things that are heavy. This kind of like regular work that is manual labor. So the answer is likely yes, it is. It's probably meeting those recommendations. I know. The only caveat, and there's a small caveat to that, would be, if somebody's looking to, I don't know if they're looking to lose weight or they're just looking to meet the guidelines. But if they're looking to lose weight, your body might have become tolerant to that level of exercise, and you might not be reaching that same degree of moderate to vigorous. Like really looking at if your heart rate's getting up high enough, if that makes sense. But it probably does meet the guidelines for activity. Yes.
So working maybe, if you cut it back to maybe 8 to 9 hours a day instead of 12 to 14, then that might be the difference too.
Oh yeah. Are you talking about was there a reduction in work hours? Yes, absolutely. So yes, reduction in work hours, less activity, absolutely. Okay, so let's go to some benefits. Who has ever looked at their blood glucose before they did something and then after they were done with their activity of choice? Has anybody done that? Okay. What have we noticed? Usually it goes down, usually, right? Because we're actually using that energy, aren't we? On average, people's blood glucose can drop 2 to 3 points every minute that they're doing activity. So quite often, people will come to me and they'll say, okay, well, I did my 2-hour post-meal blood sugar check, and I was above 180. Right? Because the guideline is to be less than 182 hours after eating. And they're like, I was above. I'm not on insulin. What am I supposed to do? So what's the answer? Try to get some walking in. Try to move your body. Burn that glucose off. And you can see it drop on average 2 to 3 points per minute. Yes?
I just wanted to mention, I grew up on manual labor up until about 8 years ago. That's when I started an office job.
Uh-huh.
And I was diagnosed with diabetes about 4 years ago.
Mm.
I recently picked up a second job. And so after my 5 o'clock job, I go to my second job. And this has just been since Monday. And I was talking to Mom last night. I said, you'd be surprised at how good I feel. It's so crazy because I come home from my 5 o'clock job and get back on the computer because I can finish my work. And about 7:30, 8 o'clock, I was so sluggish and I was ready to go to bed. But I've noticed that since Monday, and I didn't have strips, otherwise I would have checked.
Yeah.
But I am certain that
Probably better.
they were, but I wasn't actually moving around.
Okay, so for Phillipsburg people, she is talking about growing up on manual labor, and being very physically active, and then having an office job 8 years ago and being sedentary in that time, being diagnosed with diabetes 4 years ago. So in that time frame of being in an office job, and now she's actually started a second job that looks like requires a little bit more activity, lots of like manual labor. And she is reporting feeling much, much better through that transition. So I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. I think it's a great example of exactly what we're talking about. It can increase your energy. Who's ever felt maybe a little bit better after doing some activity, actually having more energy? Some people are like, I have no energy to do exercise. I get that, but if you can kind of persevere and go back to your why. Did anybody establish their why last night? Did anybody have some soul searching and kind of went down to their why? If you can persevere, always remember your why. If you can get past that, you can get through it and you will actually see improved energy. It can lower your triglycerides. It can lower your cholesterol. It can improve your HDL, which is, again, which one, good or bad? Happy. It can increase strength and then improve blood sugar control, potentially decrease medication. The first 10 years when somebody is diagnosed is where diet and exercise play the greatest role to reduce the chance that somebody has to use medication, right? It is very understandable that we can get off some of this medication. After 10 years, it is probably more likely that we need some medication, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we need insulin. And sometimes people can go off their medication. Have you heard of somebody doing that before? Absolutely. Great. Start low, go slow. We do see big differences from somebody who's doing really nothing to then doing something. So he talked about this in the video. This comes from the Nurses Health Study. It followed 120,000 women, so pretty big cohort. And women in this study went from no activity to 1 hour a week. Does that meet the guidelines? It doesn't, right? They were doing 60 minutes. We're looking for 150 minutes in a week. But it did reduce the risk of developing heart disease by almost half. How phenomenal is that? Lots of other benefits we definitely know through exercise. This study kind of points out some of the stuff that we've already sort of talked about a little bit, but you know, some people think to themselves, okay, well, I'm at this age, you know, I've got this, you know, limitation, I have these physical barriers, you know, I'm not going to be able to run like that 20-year-old kid next to me. I'm not going to get that heart rate up like I'm supposed to. The good news is that even if you feel like you're not doing something as hard as the people around you, it is still physically hard on your body. And it is still doing the same amount of good as that 20-year-old who's running, you know, miles in front of you or whatever. So even if it doesn't necessarily fall in that moderate category, it's still doing good to you. We just don't want you to hurt yourself is more important than anything. Okay, I want to talk about this one. So this is research from this professor, Stephen Blair. So let me explain what he did here. So what he did is he basically looked at groups of people and who were doing like this particular behavior. And then he said, okay, well, if we stop this behavior, how many early deaths would we have avoided by doing that? So he did this with smokers. Okay, we've got this group of smokers. Today, they stopped smoking. How many early deaths would we have avoided? Okay, he did that with hypertension, group of people that have high blood pressure. We don't have it anymore. How many early deaths would we have avoided? He did this with a lot of different categories. And what he found is that out of all of these different behaviors, having low fitness was the strongest predictor for an early death, more so than smoking, more so than high blood pressure or diabetes or something else. So low fitness is the strongest predictor for somebody to die early. That's a big risk. Has anybody heard that sitting is the new smoking of today? You guys heard that before? That's where this sort of comes from. Other research has confirmed this. This is confirmed by a large meta-analysis. Does anybody know what a meta-analysis is by chance? But a meta-analysis, there's good things to it, there's bad things to it. But basically, a meta-analysis is taking a bunch of studies that are looking at similar topics. And the benefit is that having all these studies compiled into one, you get a very large population, so you can apply that better to the general population because you have so many people, but there are some downsides to it. Anyway, this looked at 44,000 individuals, so very large cohort from that. And they did find that the higher the sedentary time, the higher the mortality rate. So what do we need to do? Look at our habits. Look at our system. How much TV watching are we doing? When are we? And I don't even want to use TV watching. I think we should use the term screen time, right? Because you've got your television, but you might have your computer and your iPad and your phone and, all these devices. And I think I should also be clear that from a work perspective, obviously we do function as a society on our computer for work, but I'm really talking about leisure time in this lens. And so how much are we really doing of that? Are we reading our books anymore? Are we having conversations with people anymore? Are we setting time aside for that? Did you know that you can put screen limits on your particular apps? Did you guys know that? So, okay, good. I think somebody knows that. You can do that. You can actually go into your apps. If you know you're getting more than you desire, you can put time limits on the apps just as a way to help out and keep you accountable. Huh?
A lot of times, especially older people, if they don't have relatives around, their kids are gone, that's the only thing they have left to keep them doing something.
What does the group think? Is there something else? Or do we kind of feel the same as on your iPad, right? Yes, thank you. So for the Phillipsburg people, she was saying, a lot of times that device can be the connection to your community at large. So it's like your way of socializing if you don't have family around or your friends are in different places or so forth. So I don't know if that also speaks true for you all. Do you guys kind of see that too or feel that a little bit? I don't know.
I think or a lot of people feel that, but just like you're talking about changing the habit and just getting up and just moving just even a little bit is going to change that. Tell yourself you can be on the screen for 30 minutes and then get up and do something. My cat kind of does that because it's very demanding, and if I don't get up, it's right here and stares at me. So then I have to get up and take care of the cat, and then I sit back down.
Animals are so amazing, aren't they? Yeah, I was staying with Judy last night, and her dog wanted to go for a walk, and it was hilarious. It's not like this dog knows me. And it looked at her husband first, like, will you take me outside? And then it went to Judy, will you take me outside? And then it turned to me, you will, right? Like, it just kept moving to the person that would say yes. I think that's a valid concern. I don't know if I have a solution for that. That might also take some soul searching or just kind of maybe putting limitations on it, like what we talked about. So,
I think our generations now, they used to socialize, actually go to people's houses and socialize with them and play cards or just chit chat. They don't do that anymore because of TV. We're able to entertain ourselves with all these devices.
So is there a solution?
You guys want to come over and play cards?
I think you're on the right path. I agree with you. You be a trailblazer.
Only if they can take the computer.
Yes.
Not allowed.
She's 70 and she's old school. She didn't ever want a cell phone to begin with. My sister taught her to get one. My dad called me the other day and he says, is there intervention for social media? Because I think your mom's addicted to Facebook. And it's her way to connect with all of her family in Texas that they haven't seen for who knows how long.
I think there's some underlying truth there. So she's talking about basically social media being addictive. What do we think? I think it is. Absolutely. So,
especially with COVID.
yes.
So it's changed all of our lives.
Yeah. I don't want to deviate too much, but kind of back to like the whole nutrition philosophy and blood sugar philosophy. What have we kind of gleaned from that? We've learned that nobody's perfect, right? And did we learn that there's percentages that's acceptable to be out of range? That's what we've learned. And outliers are to be expected. Nobody's perfect. So I think you can use that same principle on this too. I mean, I use social media, but I would say that you can put measures around it or protect yourself from it, and kind of put limitations around it so that you are within a healthy range of using it. Okay, great. Let's move on. I'm actually going to skip that. We've talked enough about that. Consider exercise snacks. So snack on exercise. I love this philosophy, but did you know that you can get as much benefit from short amounts of exercise as you can from a block of time? So I think, past thought was, oh, you have to do 30 minutes or an hour or whatever. And you know what? That's not really true. You can actually get the same health benefits if you break it up throughout the day. So we call that exercise snacking. Even 10 minutes is great. You guys saw that in the video too. For those who were walking 10 minutes or more, they saw a reduction in their blood pressure by 12%. So we know that there's advantages just to small amounts. Consider it from this aspect too. Let's say, for a person living with diabetes, they eat breakfast. What's going to happen to their blood sugar? It's going to go up. Let's say they go for a 10-minute walk after that breakfast. Will it go down? It will help it. They have lunch. What's going to happen? Same thing, right? They have a little 10-minute walk. It's going to go down. They have dinner. Same thing, 10-minute walk. Am I saying that I expect you to do that every day and just like that? No, but I want you to understand that that is a principle you can apply to improve your blood sugar intermittently throughout the day, and it's just as beneficial. If you have physical limitations, if you have pain, if you have schedule limitations because you're busy, this is another great thing about exercise snacking is you can do it just in small bits that you can physically achieve or just from a time perspective can actually achieve. All right, anybody know how many steps is recommended a day? 10,000 is recommended a day. Okay. Who knows how many steps they get in a day by chance? Does anybody ever look at that?
I look at it on the phone.
Okay.
I always don't have my phone with me. Sometimes I'll leave it on the desk.
So plus or minus 10, right? 10%. Okay, so that's great. Anybody else look at their steps?
My husband looks at his all the time. He's got one of those things.
Yeah.
But when he rides in the tractor, it just pounds those steps right along.
Oh, so a false reading. So maybe minus 20% for him. I don't know. Okay. Okay, so if you, yes.
I average like 6,000 to 12,000.
Depends on the day. Okay, perfect. Awesome, beautiful. If you happen to look at your steps, or if you ever start doing that and you're like, oh, wow, I only get 4,000 or 5,000, I'm supposed to get 10. How am I ever going to do that? What's the other sort of thing I'm pressing into people in these sessions? We're supposed to try to do 1% better tomorrow, right? So I have a patient right now who, for her, a good day is 2,000. That's fine. So I say, you know what? Let's try to get 2,020 steps tomorrow. Is that feasible? Yes. Next day, can you do 2,040? Is that possible? Maybe so. Incremental steps. Do they add up? Do they make a difference? They do. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Don't put so much expectation on yourself. Just look for 1% better tomorrow. This is a 11-minute workout that I just kind of listed just for fun. So the other thing I sort of want to point out here is you can modify things, right? So if you have, like, let's say we look at this list, you want to try this, but you're like, good heavens, I'm not doing a burpee. There's no way. That's fine. So easy jump. Okay, so where there's that, I will demonstrate a burpee. I might lose my microphone, but like easy jumping jacks. We know what a jumping jack is, but if you don't want to do a jumping jack, that's not possible for you. Guess what you can do? You can do this. That's a modified version of a jumping jack, and it's just as beneficial. That's a jumping jack. Yes. Okay, burpee. You guys really want to see a burpee? Okay. A burpee, is when you go down and you jump and then you go up. That's a burpee. I feel better now. If you don't want to do a burpee, that's fine. You can just try to touch your toes and then go up. If you can jump, awesome. If you can't, don't worry about it. Just doing this is great movement. Okay. High knees. High knees is where you're actually like, that's hard, but you can just do this, marching in place. See, I'm already like, it's a workout. Oh man. Okay. So I want you to understand that just because there's things or exercises you're looking at that are like, do jumping jacks, it doesn't mean it doesn't apply to you. You just might have to modify it, and it's just as beneficial. All right.
So what's a split squat? Tell me.
Really? Okay. You go, and then you get down, and then you jump. Okay, the timer's going off, so let's go ahead and stand up for a second.
Let's all do burpees.
Do your modified jumping jack.
I would never get back up if I tried.
Oh, okay. There are snacks in the back if you guys want to get some snacks. Just as a heads up. I'm like, yeah.
Watching the exercise is awesome.
Yeah.
Just make it your blood sugars, though. Go ahead and have separate.
Yeah, I saw I guess with like AARP somewhere else. I get emails, and AARP email has different exercises for older people.
Oh, really?
And I'm like, I'm not old enough to be that, and yet I did one I'm leaning against the I'm a mailman, so I'm leaning against the car when I'm taking a break and stuff. And I'm like, this isn't as easy as I thought it would be.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was a documentary one time on truck drivers, because, truck drivers have a high incidence of type 2 just because they have such a sedentary job. And so there was like all kinds of interventions that they like worked on. Like they kept like little bicycles in their truck. And so when they would come at truck stops, they would like ride around their truck or like do little activities like in their breaks. And there's an actual documentary on it. It's kind of interesting.
2 years ago, I was diagnosed with blood clots, and so since then they told me to get out of the car every 2 hours. And I'm like, well, I'll set a timer for every 45 minutes, so at least I'm out of the car every hour, stretching my legs in case I don't have deliveries.
Good.
And here I come here, and you're telling me now 30 minutes.
Sorry. We're up in the game.
You might mention that they're free to take these things from the TV.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
One of the ladies came over and asked how she could purchase them.
Oh, shoot. I will say that. Thank you.
I wish they would come in. But they didn't. They spent
We're talking about prebiotics.
Oh.
I go to a gastroenterologist
Oh, yeah?
in Pratt
Yeah.
who really wanted to be a chemistry. He's a doctor, but he wanted to be a PhD in chemistry. So he kind of does that on the side.
Oh,
So,
cool.
as far as probiotics, of course, he said, Jane, you can either drink kefir. You know kefir.
Yeah. Oh, kefir? Okay.
You can either drink kefir or you can take a line, which is a pill.
Yeah.
Your choice. But he said Metamucil works as a prebiotic.
Oh, really?
He said
Well, that makes
it
sense because
does.
it's a fiber.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
says you know, for you, it's a prebiotic.
Yes.
And you have to take it every single night.
Yeah.
And, you know, the fiber's just kind of extra for you. That's good for you
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
You know. But yeah, that's what he told me.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah. I would agree. Not mentioned this, and I should have a while ago, so I apologize, but we have extra education material on that table over there that's totally free. So definitely take whatever intrigues you or looks good. It is for your taking. Okay? Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap up for the exercise because we got more stuff to cover. 10 simple ways. So I just mentioned this because, again, we're trying to interject these incremental changes into your overall lifestyle. So that means making the choice to actually park far away, making the choice to actually taking the stairs instead of the elevator or escalator. Again, they seem like drops in the bucket, don't they? But they will add up. So I highly encourage it. From a safety standpoint, again, we've already mentioned this, but lifting weights specifically. So here's the only maybe issue with that is that lifting weights, if you do that or body strength training, it can be stressful on you, right? It's a stressful thing. So what did we learn about stress? What does that do to blood sugar? It can increase it. So some people are like, well, I'm confused. I lifted weights. You told me that was going to lower my blood sugar, but I actually saw it go up. And that's why. So it could be a small increase, but the benefits far outweigh that small increase you're going to see at that point. However, it can be an issue for people who have really high blood pressure because then we can see their blood pressure rise as well and be uncontrolled and or actually make eye problems worse. So you may have a conversation with your doctors if you have something like that before you start doing a strength or body weight exercise. We do have to be cautious for foot problems specifically when we're talking about activity. What's the potential danger of walking and then maybe not looking at our foot after that activity? Blister, exactly. You could have cut yourself. How would you have done that? Listen, if you've got grandkids or little kids around you, how many times do you find a Lego in your shoe and you know things get in there that you don't know about? So things like that can happen. We want you to make sure you're wearing socks and that you check your feet after you're done with the activity. Let's talk about hypoglycemia a little bit. So I mentioned that when you're doing activity in general, blood sugar drops how many points? 2 to 3 per minute. So if somebody's at a blood sugar of 100 and they plan to go for a 15-minute walk, well, how many points can they potentially drop? Maybe 30 or more. And if they're at 100, that's putting them at a potentially dangerous level, right? So we want you to consider having a small snack before you go out for exercise and bringing treatment for hypoglycemia with you in the event that you start developing that. If your blood sugar is less, yes.
I was told that when you go for a walk or something and you know you're going to be gone more than 30 minutes, you should take a snack with you.
Yes, exactly. So So she asked the question, if you're going to go for exercise for more than 30 minutes, should you take a snack? I would say absolutely. Honestly, even less than 30 minutes. I mean, for those of you who have been living with diabetes for quite some time, this will make sense. But it's amazing how quickly blood sugar can change on you, right? So I would say always bring a snack with you. You just don't know sometimes what can happen. Great point. If you have a blood sugar less than 70, we would say treat with what's called the rule of 15. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but just to kind of cover that quickly. So rule of 15 just means that you're consuming 15 grams of straight sugar. Does a Snickers bar qualify? No, because it includes protein and fat in it, right? And what is protein and fat going to do? Is that going to delay the rise in blood sugar? It will. And if you have a low blood sugar, you don't want to delay. You want it to go back up right away. So we want you to have just 15 grams of straight carbohydrate. Then you can have a snack once it recovers and gets above 70, and then you can potentially go out for exercise. For blood sugar greater than 300, this is really only applicable for our type 1s, not so much for our type 2s, but if you are over 300 and you want to try to get that down by doing some activity, I would just make it very light and leisurely, nothing too stressful on your body, because as we've learned, if you do something stressful, it could actually make it higher. So I would do very light walking to try to get that down. Okay?
Is Lifesavers any good on that?
Yes. Lifesavers is a good choice. Ooh, I want to say, oh gosh, I'd have to look at it specifically, but it's 15. The label will tell you. I'm assuming it's like 6 of them. Yeah, I think that's about right.
Florida, and her doctor told her to get
Sweet tarts. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can use that. Yeah, you can use that. So she's saying, can you use Lifesavers or Sweet Tarts? The answer is yes, because that's pure carbohydrate. Just try to keep it to 15. So that, right, right, right. A lot of those, like whenever it's Halloween time, you like stash those kids size Skittles. They'll be handy. No, those have protein in them, so I would not, and they have fat with the chocolate. This is for Wichita, so we'll move on. We've already talked about what's available in this area. Okay, we'll move into medication, but big points that we gleaned out of exercise. Do we understand the recommendation for general health? Like how much are we trying to get in a day? About 30 minutes. We also want to incorporate some kind of body weight or strength training 2 to 3 times a week. We understand why, don't we? Is that going to tap into our 400 to 500 grams of carbohydrates stored in our skeletal muscle? Yes. And we also know that it can lower blood sugar 2 to 3 points per minute of activity. Okay, so moving on. I mentioned this earlier. We're not going to spend a ton of time on medication. I'll spend more time on insulin than anything. But just to kind of go over the classes here, a lot of people are started with metformin. So who's been on metformin or who is on metformin? Okay. Okay.
30 years ago.
30 years ago? Are you still on it? No? Okay. Okay. So one of its primary actions is to decrease the liver from releasing glucose. Oh, that makes sense, doesn't it? We understand that's a problem in type 2 diabetes. Have we also learned another way we can treat that is by having a small snack before bed, or again, having that scheduled snacks or meals throughout the day, right? So that makes sense now, doesn't it? Actos, Avandia. So we don't use these medications all that much anymore. They are supposed to increase insulin sensitivity. However, they did cause weight gain, and then there was some concerns with heart issues. So we don't use those as much today. Actos, Avandia. So other ones would be like glucotrol, diabeta. I think somebody mentioned glipizide or glyperide. Okay, so that falls within this category of sulfonylureas. but they basically stimulate the pancreas to release more insulin. In our clinic space, we don't use this class very often, and the reason why is because it can potentially cause weight gain, which if we have a medication that can potentially cause weight gain, what is that going to do to insulin resistance? Make it worse? Which means what? We might need more medicine, which causes more weight gain. So we call it like a vicious cycle. So we would prefer not to have medications that are weight gaining associated. The other thing is that if it's stimulating the pancreas to release insulin, what is it doing to that organ? Making it work harder. So we don't use these as much anymore. Other ones would be Precoce, Glycet. These basically decrease the absorption of glucose in the gut. It's basically malabsorbing carbohydrates, so you're excreting some of these calories. The downside to that is it causes a lot of GI discomfort. Some people have like bloating or gas associated with that. So, Americans aren't too keen on that. So we don't really use it that much here. I think Europeans don't care as much and they tend to use it more. But here in America, we don't really care for that. Okay, here we go. So these are more of like the common medications of today. We have SGLT2s. So those would include things like Invokana, Farxiga, Jardiance. Have you guys seen commercials for those? Okay, so those are a lot more used. And what they're doing is they're trying to cause glucose to be excreted through the urine more readily. So it's a way to try to get some of that extra sugar out just through the urine. In essence, it's kind of like a diuretic. So we do want people to stay hydrated. I think I forgot to set my timer. Hold on. We'll go with 20 minutes. I know. I just realized that. So we definitely want people to stay hydrated if you're on one of these medications. Who's on something like this? Anybody? Okay. Yes. So just be especially cautious in the summer months that you're staying hydrated and drinking plenty of water. We've actually seen some people go into what's called ketosis, or basically an acidotic state from the dehydration on these medications. So just be aware of that. Wait, say that again? Ketosis, like an acidotic state. Basically, they're so dehydrated. She was asking what ketosis is. It's just a very dehydrated state, and it causes like nausea, vomiting, and usually a hospital visit. So, SGLT2 inhibitors. Well, probably. Okay. So just, be aware that that's a possibility. So because it's excreting so much urine and fluid through that medication, it can cause dehydration. So, okay, perfect. Let's go down to DPP4 inhibitors. So those are Januvia, Onglyza, Tradjenta. These ones are also a little bit more common. Anybody on these medications? I think I had one patient, you're on Januvia, right? Okay. It's a little hard to explain DPP4 inhibitors unless we talk about GLP-1 first. So let's actually do that first, and then we'll go back to DPP4. So these are kind of the medications of choice today as GLP-1s. They're heavily marketed. You guys see probably plenty of commercials on them. Victoza, Ozempic, Trulicity, Rybelsus, Bydureon. Have you all seen commercials for those? Okay, is anybody on those medications? Victoza, okay. Not good for you? Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so what is GLP-1? So GLP-1 is a hormone. I mentioned this yesterday, I think, actually. So it is a hormone that we make. Our small intestine cells actually create this hormone for us, and it does a couple of things. There's crosstalk with our brain, so it helps regulate appetite. It dims, the stimulation of our appetite. It really helps create satiety or feeling satisfied and full. And it does slow down the motility of our GI tract physically. So that also creates that fullness feeling. Because of that, it can cause nausea and vomiting. Anybody felt that? Or just nauseated? Probably so with the Ozempic, it sounds like.
It was sad because it helped me. My A1C went down and I was feeling it. I lost weight. I just couldn't handle the other side.
Absolutely. And some people just can't tolerate it, obviously. How many weeks did you try it for? Oh, okay. Do you know? Because usually on these medications, who knows? Who knows? Because usually there's like a step approach because it can cause these side effects. So like some people start on like 0.25 of the injection of Ozempic, do it for like a week or two, then move up to the 0.5. Oh, is there a question?
There is a question about those where
Yes.
if metformin is prohibiting the release of glucose, is it storing it somewhere else?
Oh, if it's inhibiting the release of glucose, cohibiting. It's decreasing the. Okay, hold on. I don't think I understand the question.
So the metformin
Yes.
decreases the liver's release of glucose.
Mm-hmm.
They're saying that if it's prohibiting that in
Yeah.
the liver, is it sending it anywhere else, or it just stays in your liver?
It's just staying. It's just keeping the glucose state in the liver. So it's preventing. Yeah, mostly the liver though. Yeah, in this action. I don't know if I answered the question well. I'm not really sure what they were. I think they're asking if it's causing glucose to stay in the liver, does that inherently cause glucose to go other places? I think is their question. Okay, so I mean, one of the dysfunction in diabetes is that the liver is releasing glucose when it's not supposed to. So it's just preventing the liver from releasing insulin in that space of when it's not supposed to. If it's needed in other reasons, it's just trying to bring back normal physiology. It's not really causing glucose to go other places, I think is what they're asking, I think. Yes.
I tried all the we tried those like 4 or 5 those.
Yes.
We tried all those and some of the others, and my sugar would go right back up.
Yes.
When I got on Victoza, it went over and it's been down ever since. It's gone down to 6.5.
Great. That's wonderful. Yeah.
And I said, oh, no insulin? He said,
For right now. Yes. Yes.
I lost a little bit of weight with it, but not
Yeah.
he said, oh, you can lose a lot of weight out there.
Oh, yeah. Not so much. Yeah, I think a lot of patients are reporting that too. Like I can't say it's a weight gaining medication, and actually it can lead to weight loss, but I think it's not as much as maybe they initially thought or marketed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gotcha. Well, it's a 6.5. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
On kind of on that same note, Betty in Phillipsburg was asking, does insulin cause weight gain?
Oh, that's such a great question. Does insulin cause weight gain? Have you guys heard that before? So the answer is a mixed answer. The answer is yes and no. The answer is it can gain weight if it's not appropriately managed. But if it's appropriately managed, it doesn't necessarily lead to weight gain. I know that's a very obscure answer, but I think when we get to the insulin section here in just a second, I hopefully can make that a bit more clear on that end. Yes.
So if you go on, say, Ozempic,
Mm-hmm.
go off these other medicines, or do you just keep adding on?
Generally, we add on. That's a great question. So the question was, is if you're on one medication and you shift to another category, do you take the other class off, or does it continue with both? So basically, she's talking about monopharmacology, dual therapy, triple therapy. That's what she's talking about. So the answer is because diabetes is a multi-organ dysfunctional state. Do you guys kind of remember like all the different things, your muscle, your kidney, your liver, your fat tissue, your brain? It's multi-organ dysfunctional. So because of that, there's not one drug that hits all the different organs. It doesn't exist. So a lot of times we start with one, and then we add on another class and start doing a dual therapy, and then we add on maybe another class for a triple therapy, just because we need multiple therapies to hit these different organs. Even for people who take insulin, quite often we still have them on a GLP-1 or an SGLT2 and take insulin at the same time because we are getting other effects from those other classes, even with the insulin added. Yes, great question.
Do any of those, do they affect or interfere with heart medications such as Plavix or something like that?
Generally not, no. Yeah, great question. Yes.
So the metformin decreasing the release of glucose from the liver. So yesterday we talked about the liver and the muscles housing those, what do you call them, quick cash stores of glucose.
Yes.
So is that putting a strain on the liver then if we're slowing the release over time? Is that causing it to build in excess?
That's an awesome question. Yes. Yes, it does. Yes, thank you. So so the question is if glucose, we kind of use the thought of, okay, if you're not tapping into our muscle cells, then we are not pushing glucose appropriately back into our muscle cells as needed. So she's asking the question, are we seeing the same thing with the liver? I think. Okay, so the answer is yes. So has anybody ever heard of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease? Yes. Okay, so what's happening, this is not necessarily related to glucose itself, so it's not exactly the same mechanism. I can't say it's the same mechanism, but it's basically excess energy is what it is. So we have excess fat that's floating through the blood. It can only go into the fat tissues for so long before the fat tissues themselves are saturated. I don't know if you know that, but a fat cell itself can actually expand 100 times of itself, so it can expand and they can multiply. They can't demultiply, unfortunately. Anyway, the point is that at some point there's a saturation point and fat starts to flood other parts of the body, and it will affect the liver. So yes and no. Anyway, that is a causation of fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Basically, it's just excess energy storage is kind of the point to that. Yeah. Okay, so going back, GLP-1, great medication. There's actually an oral medication for it called Rybelsus. You just have to consume or take that 30 minutes before you were to consume breakfast. So that's a limitation for some people there. A lot of these medications are really expensive. I don't know. Yes, if you're on a GLP-1, you are understanding how expensive these can be. Yes, exactly. So one of my little pushbacks when people tell me, well, healthy eating is so expensive, buying these fruits and vegetables are so expensive. I just kind of try to refute that by saying, how much is the medication? Treat thy food like thy medicine, right? Is that as much as a GLP-1? I doubt it. Yeah, if not more, honestly, yeah. So DPP-4 inhibitors, this is going to make sense now, but this slows the breakdown of the GLP-1 that you make yourself. So does that make sense better? And these are maybe a little bit more affordable, and again, they're oral medications, so they're not an injection. So for people who really don't like injections at all, that might be kind of a step for them too. And also from a budget constraint, they just might not be as effective as we see the actual GLP-1 medications do. So. Okay, so those are the classes. Let's move over to insulin. So who's on insulin? Okay, all right. So let's chat about insulin. I'm going to draw, if that's okay. Sure. 5 seconds? Okay. Well, while you're doing that. So did you guys know that if we look at how the pancreas normally functions, it actually releases insulin 2 separate ways? Did y'all know that? So I want you to envision a person in your mind who doesn't have diabetes. So think of that person, whoever it is, and their pancreas is actually secreting insulin 2 separate ways. All right? So how is it doing this? How is this normal physiology happening? So the first way is what we call through a drip or basal. And I want you to think about that being like a background drip. So if somebody was going to be lying in bed all day long, not doing anything, are they still using energy? Yes, because their heart is beating, their lungs are breathing. There's still metabolic processes that's happening, and that does require insulin. So background insulin, or the pancreas, basically releases this drip. And it happens in different increments throughout the day too. So maybe, they get up and they go for a walk, and, then they're sitting at their desk and it starts to go up. So it does these different drips throughout the day. Then when somebody eats something, what happens then? Releases a burst. So back to that simple but profound message, right? So small amounts of food equals small amounts of insulin, large amounts equal large amount of insulin. So they have breakfast and a burst of insulin is released. Okay, so that is why there's two different insulins that exist. So we've got long-acting and we have short-acting. Who's on long-acting? Okay, so you take long-acting and you take it usually once a day, right? A lot of people take it in the evening time. Does that sound right to y'all? Yes, okay. So you take it once a day, and that's supposed to stay in the body for 24 hours. So it's trying to replace what that pancreas would normally do through that drip method, okay? Then what? Who's on short-acting insulin? Rapid-acting, right? You're supposed to take that insulin when? Before or after your meals? Before. Good. Good. Any idea how much time before? Okay, so if it's rapid acting like Novolog or Humalog or Fiasp or whatever, Lumjev, all the things, it's about 15 minutes before. Yeah. So it should be 15 minutes before. And you're taking that to cover for your meal or to correct for a high blood sugar, right? That's how we're doing that. Yes. Sorry, my poor writing. Bolus. B-O-L-U-S. Yes. So this is just going to give you a picture of what of how insulin typically is released from like a normal physiological standpoint as well. So just kind of interesting. So you can see this is like 12 a.m. all the way until 11:59 p.m. essentially. And you can see that, basal needs actually go up. And a lot of people are more insulin resistant in the morning time, which kind of makes sense actually, because a lot of people release cortisol at that point. It's our get up and go hormone. So I don't know if that speaks to anybody, but a lot of times we need a little bit more insulin, or we might have more of a struggle at breakfast. Does that speak to anybody? I don't know if it does. Then lunch, we have normal. There's actually maybe a small dip in needs, and then dinner, and then it starts to trail off at that point. So different amounts at different times of the day.
Why do you need a long-term and short-term insulin?
To replace how the body would normally produce insulin. The question is why do you need a short-term and a long-term? For people who are not producing enough insulin, they have to replace that insulin production manually through the injections. And we're trying to. Yes. So long-term is a steady amount of insulin that's just slowly released throughout the body for about 24 hours. And that's why people take it once a day. And then that rapid acting is in the body, as you can see, for about 4 to 6 hours, actually. And yeah, again, we want to try to take that before we actually eat. Most people don't take regular or NPH anymore. These are quote unquote poorer quality at this point. Has anybody ever heard of regular or NPH insulin? Okay, I just like for people to know you can technically get this insulin over the counter at Walmart for $25 a vial without a prescription. NPH and regular. And if you don't know this, there is 1,000 units of insulin in a vial of insulin. So if you are just in a bind, if you are running out of your insulin pens, or you just know you just can't swing it that month financially, just be aware that you technically can get insulin without a prescription at Walmart for $25 a vial. So sometimes it is helpful. So you, I mean, you would mix it with the insulin. Replace it. Yeah, the question is can you replace it with the other insulins that you might be using? Most people do use Lantus, Levemir, these long-acting insulins. The answer is yes. You just have to be more strategic about it because they have different action times. You would have to take NPH usually 2 times a day, and then regular you just have to be strategic, and that's where the 30 minutes before eating actually applies at that point. Mm-hmm.
So this $25.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
How many doses is?
There's 1,000 units in a vial.
And what's that mean?
Okay. So everyone's on different units. David, we'll use you as an example if you don't mind, just because I know your name. How much insulin do you take?
I take 50 of the base
Mm-hmm.
in the morning, and then depending on what your brain allows you to eat is how much you take of the other. But I take from 30 to 50 of the fast.
Okay.
Depending on whether I cheat or not.
So the answer is that units are personalized and individualized. There's not a set dose that people take. Most people have different needs for the units, but there's 1,000 units in a vial.
300 units in a pen.
Yes, you got it.
So if you take 30 from one, when you take this cheaper one, do you take 30 from one?
You know what? I can't give you a total recommendation on that. I think that's beyond my scope, but you can ask your physician. Yeah. I would ask the physician that you work with just because he might, I don't want to give you a specific number. Yeah, sorry. That's a good question though. The question is can you replace it with the same amount? And I can't give an accurate answer on that just because I don't want to get in trouble. Okay, guess what? Timer went off. Let's move a little bit, but I'm going to keep talking so we can get through this stuff. We've got about an hour left, okay?
Insulin is so specific too. We don't even carry. We're not even allowed to even think about giving it to patients that are diabetic.
Oh, your EMS. Oh, really? Yeah.
Because it's not, I don't want to say finicky, but it is such a sensitive medication that we don't even carry it. We can't even give it.
Wow, oh my gosh, wow.
I have a question. What do you recommend when you have a low? What do you recommend taking?
How low is low?
60.
So that's considered hypoglycemia. Severe hypoglycemia is considered 55 or less. So this goes back to the hypoglycemia question. There was a question about that yesterday in Phillipsburg. His question is what do you do when you're very low? And that definition was 60. So just to be clear, 70 to 55 is considered hypoglycemia. Anything less than 55 is severe hypoglycemia. So in the state of hypoglycemia, we would want you to follow the rule of 15. So that would be the 15 grams of fast-acting carbs. That's equivalent to half a cup of juice or half a can of regular soda or 4 glucose tabs. And then once above 70, you can have a snack at that point. If it's less than 55, you actually can double the treatment. How long? 15 minutes and then recheck blood sugar. Yes, great question. So, okay, hopefully you guys maybe know this, but insulin today is synthetically made. It's not, drawn from a pig or anything like it was at one point. But just for good practice, please know that if you take insulin, once you've opened it, you don't have to refrigerate it. So it does have to stay cold if it's unopened, if it's a new pen or a new vial. But once you actually open it, you can keep it room temperature. Okay. We just don't want it to be exposed to really high temperatures or really cold temperatures, or else that protein will denature and be kind of worthless to you. So it needs to be stay cold and Yes, it is actually opposite from pantry items. Isn't that weird? I know. But it should be cold. Once you open it, then you can keep it room temperature. You can inject it really in the abdominal area, the back of the arms, the back side, your thighs. These are appropriate places to inject. But really, the wisdom here for those of you who are taking insulin is to have a pattern, right? You need to have a method to your madness. You have to have a pattern. What's the downside if somebody starts to inject in the same area over and over again? Scar tissue, and you're not going to absorb it as well. And what's the danger of that? The danger is that can happen. We see this. People inject over and over and over and over again, and their tissue lumps up, but their blood sugars aren't good. And what does the doctor do? We got to increase your insulin, even though they're actually not getting that insulin into their body all that efficiently. And one day they think to themselves, you know what? I'm going to try this spot. And then what happens? Too good. Yes. So you really do want to have a method to your madness. Do you have a question for me? Okay. I wasn't sure. Oh.
I had something interesting happen. I was in rehab for a very long time. And when I got out, they, of course, they can't use anything. So they gave me some ends, the needles to put on the pins. And I did not know this, but they had the needles must only be used one time.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, they don't, the ones that the nurses had, they don't release insulin into your body.
Yeah.
And so I was using the same needle tip and wasn't getting insulin.
Oh, okay. So she's talking about reusing needles, and the hazards of that is what she's talking about. And so,
this was like a special kind of needle that once you used it, it didn't work.
It didn't work. Oh, I've never heard of that before. But there is definitely truth that in those needles, whether it's a finger stick needle or whether it's a needle you're using for your insulin, anytime we're using that, it actually starts to splinter the needle itself, and it becomes a lot more painful, and it's just obviously not as hygienic. So it's good practice to change it out every time if you can. Right, you got it. So from a pattern method, choose how you want to do it. The problem that I have is that people will say, you know what, I am rotating my sites. I am rotating my injection places, but this is their rotation. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. Is that rotating? No, that's not rotating. So you really want to try to rotate, I would say, on one side of your body. So maybe if you start up here, you can go down 2 inches, up 2 inches, down 2 inches, up to, however far you can reach. Maybe you start doing the thigh, back of the arms. Once you've completed your spaces over here, then you can go to this side. And that way, all of this tissue is getting rest and restoration while you're rotating on the other side of your body. Mm-hmm. However works for you, for sure. So she's talking about day specifics and injecting on specific days. You know what? Whatever works for you, as long as you're moving that around, that's what we're looking for. Okay. So,
Same thing on your sensor.
yes.
Move it.
Yes.
2 weeks at a time.
Yes.
But you gotta move it.
Yeah, so he's talking about sensors and moving that as well. Good point. Is it okay if I can draw? Okay. Okay. Okay, awesome. Thank you. So let's talk about the matching game. A lot of people don't understand this. And this is not in your slide, so if you want to take notes on that, you definitely can. So insulin is a matching game. And when I'm talking about insulin, I just want to refer, at this point, I'm actually just going to be talking about rapid acting. Okay, I'm not going to talk about basal insulin at this point. So we're talking about Novolog or Humalog, essentially. Okay, you guys with me? All right, so back to our simple but profound message. So how do we decide how much insulin to take for our meals? How do we do that? There's a few ways. The first way is what's called set dose. So what's a set dose? A set amount of units that your provider has said take. Most people are on a set dose. David, you reported being on a set dose. You'll have to tell me your name over here, but I think you're on a set dose too, right? Okay, so they've done some adjustment. But generally people are told, you know what, take 15 units, per meal or something like that. Okay, does that speak to anybody? Does that make sense? You all with me on that? What's the downside? The downside is that a lot of providers just don't explain this all that great, and they don't explain that 15 units is supposed to match a certain amount of carbohydrate. Did y'all know that? So let's say that this is supposed to meet or match, here I'm going to do it in red so it's a different color, 60 grams. That's what it's supposed to match. And just to be clear here, how would we know if something matched? We would know because your blood sugar would be less than 180 2 hours after eating, right? So if we can get there, it's doing a good job matching, right? But a lot of people don't know this, and they might wake up in the morning and they're not all that hungry and they decide to have one piece of toast and take their 15 units. One piece of toast is equivalent to 15 grams. So what does that put them at risk for? Low blood sugar. Another day they go to, a breakfast joint with their friends and they get pancakes with syrup and sausage and orange juice and all the things. And that's like 120 grams. And they take their 15 units. Do you see what I'm saying? So that set dose really should come with a set amount of food. The plus side of this is that you don't have to, change your insulin units. You take your set dose and you just try to keep it to a set amount of carbohydrates. And again, for most women, that looks like 45 to 60. For most men, that looks like 60 to 75. Y'all with me? We're good there? Okay. There is another way of doing it, so just be aware. Whoops, I'm in a different color. Oops, hold on. So another way is what's called insulin to carb ratio. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this today just because there are time constraints, but I do want you to know that this is a possibility. But this just means that we can use a ratio and we can say, you know what, 1 unit of insulin, will cover somebody for, I'm going to do it in red again to keep it consistent, 10 grams of carbohydrate, right? So that is an example of a ratio. And somebody can look at their plate of food and think, you know what? I'm eating 30 grams of carbohydrates. I just need 3 units. Okay? Okay, I went to a barbecue and I ate fruit salad and a hamburger and some chips and a cookie. And that's more like 90 grams. So I need 9 units. Does that make sense, guys? So that is another way to play the matching game. Do you have to do some thinking? Yeah, you have to kind of do some math and thinking, which is the downside. But the plus side is that it will allow you to maybe eat differently throughout the day so that you can better match your insulin. I just wanted you all to know about that. Questions? Does that make sense?
I was told that if you have 30 grams for dinner today, you need 30 grams for dinner tomorrow on Wednesday. Same thing for supper.
So they're probably trying to get it where the consistency.
Not the same carbs, but the same amount of carbs.
Yes.
Is that why you stay
Yeah. So she's saying that she was recommended to stick within 30 grams for each dinner time frame for consistency reasons, to be congruent. So that's definitely one approach to doing that. That's not a wrong approach at all. But for those of you who are taking insulin, I just want you to be aware that that's how you play the matching game. Okay? Does anybody want me to talk about corrective insulin, or should I move on? Like corrective insulin, like extra insulin to bring blood sugar down. Do you guys want me to talk about that? Yes or no? Yes? Yes? Okay, yes. So sorry, back to the drawing board. Thank you. Okay, so I'm sorry, this conversation is kind of only really applicable for people who are taking insulin, so bear with me. But it is good information really for everybody at some point probably. But what is a corrective dose? So a corrective dose is the insulin added to food and to bring blood sugar down. So let's say you're walking into lunch. You're going to lunch and your blood sugar is 200. Well, if you know how much insulin you need for your food, that's great. But technically, that would just get you from 200 to 200. So you need extra insulin to not only bring that blood sugar down, but also to cover for the food. So we call that a correction factor. So I just want to mention a couple of things on this. Again, we can't spend a ton of time on it, but I do want to just for you to be cautious. So who remembers how long insulin is in the body for rapid acting? How many hours? 4 to 6. Great. So here's the problem I see a lot. Let's say that it's 12 p.m. So we had that lunch. And here is 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. Okay? All right. So let's say that we eat our meal and we ate the 60 grams, whatever it was, and we took our X amount of units. You know what? For clarity, I'm going to give an example. Let's say that we'll say that we took 30 units of insulin. Okay? Are y'all with me? Is that good? So this is an example. So they take that 30 units, here. And what happens to blood sugar? So let's say that blood sugar, goes up. And they look at it 2 hours after eating, because that's what we're supposed to do, right? And let's say that they are elevated. Maybe they're at the 200 point. Okay, so what is the knee-jerk reaction to do at this 2 p.m. mark? What do people want to do? Take more insulin. All right, is that a bad thing to do? Can be. I love the answer. Can be. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but the problem is that people sometimes forget that they have 2 more hours of insulin that's still remaining and working on blood sugar. So who's heard of the term stacking insulin? Has anybody ever heard that term before? So stacking insulin is where you have insulin on top of active insulin, and then that poses the risk of hypoglycemia. So somebody might say, oh, well, I'm 200. I'm going to add more insulin at this point. Not realizing that there's 2 more hours to go. And yes, that can cause potentially a low because we have this also working on blood sugar. Okay, so the answer is you can take insulin at this point. It is possible. It is fine to do. It's just a matter of how much. It's just a matter of how much. And I know that this is all very generalized. This is not personalized. If you guys wanted to have that discussion, we could definitely try to have that discussion of what exactly does that mean. But I would just try to be very cautious on how much insulin you're giving at that point. So I just want you to be cautious if you do that. Okay? Questions on that, guys? Yes, that's what I'm basically referring to as overdosing. Yep. Yep. Great question. What does the group think? You can. Yep, you can definitely. Or you can exercise. Okay, so let's move on to monitoring. I'm going to kind of have to run through some of these. I'm not going to spend probably a ton of time on this either, but from a monitoring standpoint, if you're on oral medications, we're really looking to maybe test your blood sugar, manually at least one time a day. Does anybody try to do that now? If you're on oral medications, we're looking to test at least once a day. Okay, beautiful. If you're on insulin, we're looking for you to test at least 3 times a day, kind of minimum, or using a sensor. That is the best thing to really do when it comes to monitoring your blood sugar. I was looking at this early because there was a question about this yesterday, and I was trying to see if Medicare had changed something about sensor guidelines. I don't think so. I'll keep you posted if something does change that I know of, but I think it still is required your test, or you're taking at least 3 injections a day, is what I'm still seeing. Medicare. Private insurance, it depends. A lot of times they follow Medicare guidelines, but sometimes they don't. It's worth it. If you have commercial insurance and you want to see if you can get a sensor, definitely ask for a prescription and try. And the worst thing they can do is say no. So, yeah, we were talking about this yesterday, but for Libre, the out-of-pocket price is about $75 a month. And just be aware that some people use sensors off and on. So don't feel like you have to be chained to that, using it month after month after month. Like, some people really find benefit from using it for a month, giving it a break for a few months, doing it again when they can afford it, whatever makes sense to them. Yes?
I went on last night and to the Abbott website for the Libre.
Yeah.
And they do have a program you can see if you qualify for to get a free sensor to try it out. And then you can see if your insurance will cover it.
Awesome. Okay, so she's saying if you go to the Abbott website for the Libre, you can actually plug in your information and request a free sample sensor, which is always a good thing. If you can do that, I highly encourage it. And then if you like it, then you can request a prescription and see if you can get coverage from it, is what it sounds like. Yeah. Go ahead.
When I said yesterday that it cost like $3,000, the lady was telling me that is when you start, you get extra this, plus your sensor, plus this, plus. And she said it's up to 3,000.
For a sensor. Oh, there's so many variables. Yes. Generally for let's take Libre for example. So let's just take Libre for example. I wish I had a sample of a Libre, but I don't. Okay, note to myself, I have to bring that. For Libre, yeah. So the Libre, you can actually get it to where it communicates to your phone. So you don't have to buy a receiver. Like, this is her receiver.
If I want to take it, which I know mine's going to be high, but
So you don't have to buy that receiver. I mean, it can just go onto an app on your phone. So that's a cost that's eliminated. It does require certain compatibility. Right. Yeah, it's just another cost, but it's a one-time cost, and they're not that expensive. Yeah. Dexcom, yeah. Can I steal that so I can show it? Thanks. You have a Dexcom. That's right, yeah. It's okay, I got it. Thanks. So she's talking about Dexcom. Okay, so note to self, I need to bring samples, sensors next time. So Dexcom, Libre, those are the two. I actually have a slide on it. Let's go to that since we're talking about it. Maybe. Yes. So there's actually 4 sensors on the market. But Libre and Dexcom are the more accessible ones. We don't recommend Guardian. It's just not a good sensor, guys. I'll be candid with you. Eversense is kind of this interesting sensor where you can do, it's implanted into the arm. I also don't recommend it. So Dexcom and Libre really are your viable options at this time. Anyway, so Dexcom, the big difference here is it's going to constantly give you your data. So it's like true continuous glucose monitoring system. So this lady, this has one, and what's happening is it's constantly feeding into her sensor. She doesn't have to do anything. She can just look at her receiver, and it just tells her immediately what her number is. Now, from the Libre standpoint, it doesn't have that. You have to scan in order to see your number. Both of them are excellent, and they're great tools, especially compared to finger sticking. And of course, Christy has a Dexcom. Yeah, and Christy has seen it all. So, yeah. So both Libre and Dexcom, you can have alerts set that are personalized to you on what you want. So if you want to be notified if you get to a certain level, it should beep at you. And that's probably what's happening with David and this patient. You can have your, are you willing to share yours? That is a very good day. I am super impressed. Good job. Yeah, the Dexcom is pretty superior. It's more expensive though, so that's why a lot of patients are getting Libres, just because it's a little bit more affordable. And again, 2 sensors will be about $75 out of pocket without insurance a month, right? Yes.
With the Libre, I was told that if you don't scan within a certain amount of time, you lose the data. Is that correct?
I think you have to scan. That sounds right to me. I think you have to scan like once every 12 hours or something, or else it starts to break apart the data. Yeah, that sounds right. Mm-hmm.
But the Dexcom continues even through the
No matter what. Yes, you got it. So. So they might, yeah, they probably do. We get samples in our clinic, so we give people samples often, but it wouldn't surprise me if they would allow you to try to get a sample online. Yes. 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 Yeah, it's called Hello Dexcom. Yes, absolutely. They do. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So she's talking about now sharing data. So the Libre sensor, that's another huge benefit to sensors, is that the Libre and the Dexcom both allow you to be connected to your provider. And then if you're having a rough go, it is possible for you to call in and say, hey, is there any chance you could look at my data? And they would be able to just immediately look at it because it would be available. We do that all the time in our clinic.
So if they just have the meter and they don't have the app, they still need to bring the meter in for it to download.
Correct. Right. Right. So that's exactly. So it only is applicable for sharing data if you have the apps that can collect the data and then share it. Yeah. You just download it. Yeah, no, that's okay. It's not for everybody, so there are options if it's not for you. Also, just one last note, you can share your data with loved ones. So especially with Dexcom, I think Libre has this too. Yeah. But with Dexcom, for sure, you can share your data with a follower. So if you have somebody who wants to kind of monitor and watch you, they can do that. That would be that support person. Yes. Oops. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Huge, huge. The only thing is that the child has to have a cell phone in order to collect the data. So that's been a big limitation for Dexcom. Yes. Right. So I know they're working on it where, okay, we're getting off topic. Anyway, all right, well, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So for those of you who are not on a sensor and finger sticking, when do you do it? A lot of time people will finger stick in the morning. So who does that? Who looks at their morning blood glucose? Beautiful. Does anybody look at it at different times of the day? Okay, great. So, again, probably one time a day if you're on oral medications, maybe more if you can swing it. Just depends on what your insurance covers. But I do recommend that you change the time frame of the day. So for example, if you're doing 2 times a day testing, you might on day 1 do a fasting and then after breakfast number. If you on day 2 want to, you could do fasting and then before lunch. Day 3 can be fasting and 2 hours after lunch. Day 4 can be before lunch, 2 hours after lunch. Day 5 can be before dinner, 2 hours after dinner. So you can rotate the time frames to give you a better picture of what your blood sugar is doing. And before you go to bed. Yes, you got it. Absolutely. So she mentioned testing before bed as well. Here are the friendly reminders. We talked about this yesterday, but these are what we're looking for blood sugar wise. If we are not getting into goal, we have to do what? Go back to our therapies. And our 3 therapies are diet, exercise, and medication. And from a diet aspect, does it make sense now on what we maybe need to do? Watch portion sizes, eat more plants, consume more vegetables, a higher fiber diet, less processed items. From an exercise standpoint, what are we trying to do? Get 30 minutes in, break up sedentary time. Oh, dang. All right. Well, I'll let you guys go because we're going to be done here in 20 minutes anyway. And then here are the sensor goals again for you as well if you ever do go on a sensor. Okay, I'm going to move on to complications. So reducing risk. So if you have a low blood sugar, what do we do? So we've already talked about this actually a couple times, but anything less than 70 is considered hypoglycemia. This is not in the book. If you want to write this, you can. But anything less than 55 is considered severe hypoglycemia. So there's actually 2 categories there on that. Lots of different reasons it can happen. Lots of symptoms. You guys have probably felt that before. Who's felt symptoms before of hypoglycemia? Sweaty, shaky. You might not be the nicest person in the world at that time. Fast heartbeat, blurred vision, headache, all of that. So this is the rule of 15. We do want you to treat with 15 grams of fast-acting carbohydrates. If you happen to be in a severe hypoglycemic event, so again, anything less than 55, you can double the treatment. So it can actually be 30 grams of fast-acting carbohydrates versus 15. So we're looking for 4 glucose tabs. It can be a half a cup of juice, a half a can of regular soda. It can be, again, the fun size candies as long as they're pure sugar and they don't have chocolate or nuts associated with them, okay? We want you to wait 15 minutes and then recheck your blood sugar. If you're above 70, at that point, it's appropriate to have a snack to try to prevent it from going back down. So that can be like 1 piece of bread and peanut butter. That can be half an apple and a string cheese. That can be a handful of nuts and some berries. You know, that's kind of what we're talking about to keep it from going down.
You want to eat just like a sugar packet?
You can have it for when you're low. You can have a sugar packet. I think a sugar packet is a teaspoon. Does that sound right to you guys? I think it's a teaspoon, so it would be 3 sugar packets because that would be 15. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're low, yeah, you need actual sugar. Mm-hmm. So his question or his remark was, can you do the sugar packets? The answer is yes, you can. Yeah. When people have hypoglycemia, a lot of times there is a biological response in that low. Basically what happens is you go into survival mode, right? You have this fight or flight experience. And what tends to happen is people overconsume. They just go to the refrigerator door and they start eating whatever they can. And we understand that because we see it all the time. We get it. However, if we do that, what happens on the other side? Yes. Then we start riding the roller coaster, which is not a fun roller coaster to ride. So I know it's tough, guys. I get it. I really do. But try your best to keep it within the 15 grams and then have a snack. You will find it really does work because we do it, again, in our clinic often, and it really is the trick. Okay? Severe hypoglycemia. So this is for if you're unconscious. Or if you're starting to go so low, you actually might develop, it might be hard for you to swallow. Like you could choke on something, right? That's what we're talking about here. Does anybody watch Steel Magnolias, that movie? Yes. Yes. She's in I think the hair shop getting her hair done, and she starts seizing for her wedding. That's right. So that is, yeah, she probably was really nervous. So that is a time I would have used a glucagon kit. So you can get a traditional glucagon kit, or you can even get what's called Baqsimi. Okay, I thought for sure I had brought a sample. Here, I did. Okay. So this is a new one. So this is a nasal spray, so super nice. It would just go into the nostril, and you would just inject it into the nostril, and it's just inhalable. Wonderful. They also have auto-injectable ones, because the traditional glucagon kits, like the red one that's in the picture there, somebody's giving this to you. And in that moment, if you can imagine finding somebody passed out or getting low to that point, it's scary. And a caregiver trying to draw out this huge needle and shake it up and then inject it, it's just not ideal. So the nasal sprays or the auto-injectable glucagon kits have been a great step forward in diabetes care. If you're taking insulin, we do recommend it. We do recommend that you have something like this at your house. Why? What do sometimes people accidentally mistake their insulins? Do they sometimes accidentally think, oh, here's my short acting. Oh, wait, did I take that short acting? I don't think I did. Oh, I'm going to take it. And then they overdose, right? That happens, right? So it is good to have that if you're taking insulin.
Are those over the counters?
It's a prescription. Prescription recommended, yeah, required. Hyperglycemia, lots of different reasons for that. Technically, anything over 200 is considered hyperglycemia. Lots of symptoms that we've already talked about. How do we treat that? We do treat that through fluid, so drinking plenty of water, because we're trying to do what? Dilute your blood. And then also, we do want to move our body, or maybe even take some insulin if you can. I'm not going to talk about ketone testing today. That's really for just our type 1s. We're going to move on. So let's talk about long-term complications. I know, all the really fun stuff, right? So what are some of these big complications that happen in diabetes? Like what happens in diabetes if it's uncontrolled? What do we see? Heart problems? Yes. Eye problems? Kidneys, nerves, all of these things. A lot of it goes down to microvascular complications. And kind of the concept I want you to consider is this tiny vessel that's feeding these tissues becomes pressurized from this very thick, gloopy, sugary blood, and it starts to break and burst. That's the primary concept with all of these long-term complications. Okay, so let's talk about eyes first. So retinopathy, damage to the retina, which is in the back of the eye. The retina really is the one that's sending pictures to us so we can see what we're looking at. And again, the small blood vessels in the retina become weak, they balloon, they break, they bleed. That's what's going on there. We have two types. We have non-prolific and then we have prolific. Non-prolific is maybe not as dangerous just because blood vessel changes are found kind of only in the retina. But prolific really means that new blood vessels are actually growing on and around the retina, and that's what's causing blindness. So this is just showing maybe what your optometrist might look for is like breaks in those blood vessels. And how do we prevent it, right? So how do we prevent this from happening? First and foremost is having an annual dilated eye exam. Who's had a dilated eye exam in the last year? Okay, beautiful. So we want you to do that every year. It's the best thing you can do, not only to establish that baseline, but then, of course, to see changes that happen on a yearly basis. Of course, blood sugar is critical. Just because somebody has diabetes, are they destined to have retinopathy? No. No, they're not. As long as we can get that blood sugar in control, we're not as likely to see this. Blood pressure, obviously, just as critical. Definitely call your eye doctor if you're seeing sudden eye changes, flashing lights, black floaters, stuff like that. You need to call your eye doctor immediately. Kidney disease, same reasoning. These small blood vessels in the kidneys also really bleed, and now we start to have excess protein being leaked out into the urine, and our inability to filter out toxins. A lot of people don't feel anything initially, but then later signs can be uncontrolled high blood pressure. Maybe it's itching. It could be extreme fatigue or chronic nausea. And of course, that classic symptom of the edema in the ankles and legs. Does anybody, erase. Next. Okay, and then if we have like a normal kidney, it's a healthy function and healthy size, a diseased kidney actually is smaller in size and granular. So how do we prevent kidney disease from happening? So that would be another annual thing. So we're looking for a particular lab, actually. It's albumin and creatinine ratio, and you can find that in the urine. So that should be a urine analysis that's done also on a yearly basis. Has anybody seen this done on them before by chance? Okay, beautiful. Hopefully you have. A lot of times people aren't very familiar with what ranges we're looking for, so I put them on here for you. We want it to be less than 30 milligrams per gram, or having some watchful eyes if it's anything greater than 30. Of course, blood sugar and blood pressure are also critical, and then we have blood pressure pills that could be needed. Do you guys know of anybody that was on dialysis before? Yes? Okay. Not a great way to live, is it? What is dialysis? What does it look like? And puts it back in you. Yes. And how long does that take? 4 hours. 4 hours the 3 times a week. Yes. Or you can do what's called peritoneal dialysis, where you hook up at night and you sleep through the night and they dialyze you. Either way, it's not a good condition. The number one cause of dialysis is diabetes. So we want to protect your kidneys by really monitoring those numbers. Nerve damage. This is a lot more common. High blood sugars, same thing. They're really damaging the nerves because the nerves are not being fed that blood like it's supposed to. We have 2 types here as well. We've got peripheral and then we have autonomic. Peripheral is sort of the stuff that people more or less feel, right? So like the tingling in your feet, maybe the numbness you might feel, maybe a burning sensation. Have you guys felt that before by chance? Anybody? Not a good feeling. Autonomic is the nerves that are affected in our internal organs. So like, our stomach, right? So some of the nerves that are feeding our stomach or intestines are not there anymore. And sometimes we don't have that movement like we're supposed to. And so that's where we have what's called gastroparesis. We can have sexual dysfunction, bladder dysfunction, things like that. So this just shows you a picture of the way that it's supposed to look. This is, a healthy nerve that is being fed that blood vessel, by that blood vessel, and then we have the diseased blood vessel, and now we don't have any feeding that nerve anymore. Okay, how do we prevent this? Obviously, A1C, keeping blood sugar in check, no nicotine products. Nicotines clearly are going to make this condition much worse. There are some prescriptions available, Neurontin, Lyrica, Cymbalta, and then we even have pain clinics that we could refer patients to if needed. There are actual devices that are now available that they can implant to try to prevent pain without having to use an actual medication. So that's another option. Okay, vascular disease, we talked about it already. People are more likely to have heart disease if they live with diabetes too. So we want to reduce that for sure. A lot of that fat is building up in the blood, and then really causing stricture, and blood cannot go through, and then we have that heart attack, that stroke, whatever it can be. We've already talked about this, but what causes a lot of this plaque buildup? How are we getting that in our body? What type of fat? Trans fat's one of them, and saturated, very good. So that was one of our big three that we talked about yesterday, right? Sodium, added sugar, saturated fat. And it's not like it's bad to eat these things. It just should be eaten in moderation, because anything above that, we're in excess, we're going to see this condition happen. Obviously, A1C is really crucial here too. So even with a 1% increase in our A1C, we can see an increase in adverse events, meaning the risk of having a heart attack or a stroke occur by 17%. So these incremental increases make a big difference. Blood pressure, no different here. Definitely want to keep that under control. Annual lipid profile. Does anybody ever look at that when they get that done? Hopefully. Awesome. So you can look at your cholesterol, your triglycerides, your LDL, your HDL, etc. How can we get our HDL up? How do we get that up? Exercise, very good, and even marine animals or polyunsaturated fatty acids, right? Monounsaturated fatty acids too. Maybe a statin can be needed, and then of course no smoking, regular exercise, maintaining a healthy weight, all these things. Okay, feet. So feet we're mostly concerned about. Why are we concerned about feet? Right? What is the risk with diabetes and our feet? What do we? Infection. Very good. Very good. Let's see. Does anybody know somebody that's developed a foot problem living with diabetes? Okay. So we're going to pick a person. I'm going to, if you don't mind sharing. Was it a quick thing or was it a slow thing? Slow. Okay. How did it look?
Started out just like almost like a blister.
Uh-huh.
And then it slowly opened and got black.
What was the time frame on that?
I would say just a few weeks.
Okay. So it actually is a pretty quick thing, like the way that it progresses. Yeah, especially that's a great example. Does anybody else kind of see that balloon up pretty fast? Yes.
I had a coworker that had really no feeling in her feet at all. She could walk, but she had caught her toe on the floor threshold or something, was walking barefoot, a rare occasion.
Oh gosh.
And had just a minor scrape that flared up very quickly into a sore and infection. She had to have her toe back. She said,
Oh my gosh. Wow. So she's telling a story for the Phillipsburg people of a coworker that couldn't feel her feet, had a small nick, and that again ballooned up pretty quickly. So what's the issue with feet, right? So here's your heart. What's the furthest place away from your heart? Your toes, your feet, right? So if you have a little cut and what do you need to come to fight infections? White blood cells, right? So you got to make these white blood cells, they got to get down to your toe. And if you've got thick, gloopy, sugary blood, it's challenging for that to happen. Of course, bacteria, oh my gosh, bacteria, that scared me. Bacteria love sugar too. And these are going to take a long time, unfortunately, to heal. So we do want you to examine your feet daily. That is a guideline. And I know that sounds intense, but it's exactly for these reasons and these stories that we shared, right? These little things can immediately become critical. So look at your feet every day. If you can't really see your feet well, you can use a mirror, you can examine, looking for cuts, blisters, red spots, warmness to the touch, anything that's breaking, calluses, stuff like that. Obviously, we do want you to wash your feet daily. We just don't want you to wash it in hot water. Why not? What's wrong with hot water? It can get burned and then it can dry out. Great. So we don't want that. And if you can't feel your toes or your feet, how do you know how hot it is when you get in, right? So that's where you could burn your feet, actually. We also don't want you to soak your feet for similar principle. We don't want to dry it out. Applying lotion to the top and the bottom of your feet is something we want you to do to keep it, hydrated and won't crack out. What's the problem with applying lotion in your toes? Fungal infections, potentially, yes. So not really in your toes if you can not do that. We don't want you to trim into your toes. We want you to trim straight across. What's wrong with trimming into your toes? Ingrown toenails, maybe open wounds if you're too aggressive. And also, if you have an ingrown toenail, we don't want you doing your own surgery, guys. Okay, you got to go to somebody who knows what they're doing, a podiatrist or a nurse who is trained in this. Remove your socks and shoes when you go to your doctor's office, just as a friendly reminder to them to look at their feet. They should be looking at it at least once a year as well. Does anybody have a foot inspection done at least once a year, hopefully? Okay, good. More hands should go up, I think. Yeah. So that's a friendly reminder to your physician to look at that. We don't really want you to go barefoot, not even at home. I know that's also kind of an aggressive recommendation, but that is a great example of what she just talked about in that story. I think it sort of depends on the degree of neuropathy, but we definitely want you to wear socks. What's the problem without wearing socks and you have your shoes on, right? That potential blister increases. We want you to wear comfortable shoes, nothing that's too tight or too loose. Don't buy that 25% off shoes just because it's what you want, but it's one size too big or one size too small. You will have to have the right shoes for you. Shake out your shoes. I know that also sounds kind of like a ridiculous guideline, but if you have small children around you, you guys live, a little bit more rural. You never know what can get into your shoe. But with little kids, they put Legos and Hot Wheels and who knows what in your shoe. So just look at that.
I had a foot problem that I had never heard of before it happened, and I was walking a lot at that time, like 3 miles a day, and I developed Charcot foot.
Okay.
And I didn't know whether anybody else had heard about that or not, but at the arch it starts coming out instead of going in, and talking about time frame, it took a long time and it really didn't hurt anything, and that was part of the neuropathy. So it's all very complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Okay, this is the relationship of A1C to risk of microvascular complications. This comes from a pivotal trial called the Diabetes Control and Complications Trial. So it's a little old at this point, but it's still a really good and relevant study. So what this is saying is, as A1C increases, now we see the relative risk increase. And just to be clear on what that really means, so you have like this 1, 3, 5, 7. So this means that if somebody has an A1C of 9, they are 5 times more likely to develop retinopathy. That's how you could read this graph, okay? If they have an A1C of 12, we're 7 times more likely to develop neuropathy. So that's how you could read that, all right? So that has to do with the kidney as well. Mm-hmm. First one's I. Oh, and then nerve, and then that's actually also a sign of kidney disease as well, the bottom one. Yeah. All right, moving on. Oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. Shoot. Okay, we're going to do this. Actually, we don't have too much more to go, I promise. So I do like to talk about healthy coping. Do you guys remember my illustration yesterday with the red balloon? And I was talking about how it feels to live with diabetes and how you're bouncing this red balloon just perfect every day. That's a lot of burden on you. And so people living with diabetes are more at risk for developing depression or anxiety just from feeling alone and different and just the stress of doing what they're trying to do. Please recognize if you have signs of depression. So these are some symptoms you could look for. If you're interested, I should have brought this, but you can go online. This is what's called Zung. So it's Z-U-N-G, self-rating depression and anxiety scale. So if you go to Google and you type in Z-U-N-G, Zung, self-rating depression and anxiety, you can find these scales where you can self-rate yourself, and see where you land on depression or anxiety degrees. And if it's concerning based off of what those self-reported surveys tell you, I would bring it to your provider and say, you know what, I think I might need some help on this. So it's ZUNG. There are options. There's counseling. There's therapy. Group classes like this, I find therapeutic. I don't know if you guys feel that way at all, but just kind of being in a setting where other people are dealing with the condition, kind of knows what it feels like, is therapy in itself. Also, you should go play solitaire because that would be therapy too. We definitely saw that regular exercise can reduce symptoms of depression and anxiety. We saw that in our video. And healthy diet makes a big difference too, but do not discount medication in here. Y'all, mental health, a lot of times there's a chemical imbalance and it is necessary for us to take medication to correct that as well. From a stress management standpoint, a lot of times when people are stressed or they're feeling sad, quite often they reach for food, right? It's just kind of the natural thing to do. I'm stressed, I need chocolate. I'm stressed, I need French fries. I'm sad, I need ice cream. This is a coping mechanism when we're stressed. So I want to try to teach y'all good stressful coping mechanisms. And from a blood sugar standpoint, what does our blood sugar do? It goes up just because of, again, fight or flight experience and the release of hormones. So let's talk about some helpful coping strategies for stress. The first one is a journal. And I know that doesn't sound all that exciting, but if anybody has gone to a counselor before or a therapist, a lot of times they recommend journaling. And there's a reason behind that. What's the benefit of journaling? It allows you to really reflect on how you cope the situation, what worked, what didn't work, etc. Whenever I'm talking about journaling, I just recommend doing it for a short period of time, like 3 or 4 days. Anything more than that becomes a burden, and then you kind of despise doing it. So just do it for a few days, and that might help. Maybe do fewer things. Set priorities for yourself. I love to speak about this. Does anybody ever set meetings with themselves? Do you ever do that? You're like, this is a meeting for me. This is my time. I go to the gym, and if somebody calls me, I'm like, I'm in a meeting because, I'm in a meeting with myself. I just happen to be at the gym. And I'm not going to talk to you until I'm done with my meeting, right? So set time for yourself. Set priorities for what needs to do. And sometimes we have to look at our priorities and shed the things that aren't necessary. Case in point, you don't have to be involved in a gazillion things. Like if you're raising kids, how easy is it for us to be like, oh, baseball and gym and soccer and whatever, one thing at a time. It's easy for us to say yes. Try to set priorities for just what you want to do. Also, change your perspective, right? Do you know that our life is going where our thoughts are going, right? However we think is the trajectory of our life. If we have a negative thought process, we're going to have a negative trajectory. If we have a positive thought process, we're going to have a positive trajectory. I have had patients come to my office and say that diabetes is the best thing that's ever happened to them. Right? Can you believe that? And you know what they do? They change their life. And to them, becoming diagnosed with diabetes was the best thing because it made them realize what they had to change to have a better life. And they are thankful for that, right? So they have a different perspective on it. And you know what? They do phenomenal. You can redirect that stress to something that is creative, or again, something you enjoy doing, like gardening. Just from a coping mechanism, if you are a stress eater, I just want to be clear. It is not bad to eat if you're hungry, right? Listen to your body. If you're hungry, eat, honor that hunger. But if you're not hungry and you're reaching for food, this is where we need to say, you know what, a different mechanism is needed. A different coping strategy is needed. I need to go outside. I need to remove myself from the situation. I need to go talk to my best friend. I need to go on a bike ride. I need to do something to get me away from that. Keep your sense of humor, right? Stressful things are stressful, and sometimes we can't change them. And honestly, we just have to laugh at the situation. Like, we really do. I have a 2-year-old, and sometimes I'm in the grocery store. I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old. Sometimes I'm in the grocery store, and he's sitting in the cart, and I kid you not, he's reaching behind him and finding the things he can find and throwing them across the aisle. Well, not that dramatic, but it's close. And I kind of laugh. I mean, he's disciplined. Don't think I let my kids do whatever they want, but it's kind of funny. And it's stressful because people judge me, but I think it's hilarious. We have to laugh in our stressful moments. The last one I want to teach you, and this one I definitely want to teach you, is breathing exercises or breathing techniques. Has anybody ever done this before? Breathing techniques, super helpful, don't you think? Yes. So we're going to do this today. One of the things that's happening in stress is our heart rate is increasing, right? Our blood pressure is increasing. We're releasing hormones. So we can slow that down. We can slow down how you're reacting to the stress, and we can manage our blood sugars better. So I'm going to teach you how to do this. This is kind of a form of meditation, if you will. But basically what's going to happen is I'm going to count to 3. And then I'm going to have you breathe in for 4 counts. So just nice deep breath. And then when you close your eyes, well, you'll close your eyes and then you'll breathe in. And then I want you to reflect your thoughts internal when you breathe out. So I want you to turn internal. Think about how your brain is feeling, how your throat is feeling, how your lungs are feeling. Kind of redirect your thoughts from external to internal. Can you all do that? You ready? Okay. So I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, and then we'll get started. But 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay? Very helpful. If you struggle with sleep, does anybody struggle with sleep at night sometimes? Have insomnia? This is a great way to reduce the stress and to turn your thoughts internal. It's a great way to control your blood sugar when you're feeling stressed, is actually using this breathing technique and getting your heart rate down. Okay? Okay, I'm going to move on. Last couple slides just because I know we're over. So we're going to move over to problem solving. Just a couple things here. Hopefully you guys have attended this class and you are going to walk away and think to yourself, I've got work to do. I've got goals. I've got things I want to change. And I encourage you to look at that and make those goals. But I want you to realize that there's going to be barriers that come up. There's going to be a challenge that you didn't anticipate. There's going to be life that throws a curveball at you, and it might mess with your goals. So let's kind of walk through some of those. I have patients that come to me, they're like, I made the goal to walk. That was my goal, but oh my gosh, it started raining. So what can I do? Put on a raincoat, keep walking. Y'all's answers are different than Wichita answers. Okay. I like it. The fortitude. They're like, we go to the mall. Yeah. No, that's wonderful. Keep going. The weather has gotten too cold or too hot or too humid or too windy or whatever. I don't think walking is a good idea anymore. What can we do instead? I love it.
Inside, walk inside in place, do exercises, or
Absolutely. Looks like we have the pool. That's an option. There's different options. We have to problem solve through it. Up and down the stairs. Great, great idea. I want to.
Does anybody use the track at the gym at the high school?
Civic center's open at night. They're not scheduled or something.
Okay, perfect. I want to start eating better, and I made a goal to eat more at home, but my friends invited me out for dinner. So, what should I do? Should they go?
Volunteer to make them do.
Oh, I love that. That's a good one. So the answer is that food is more than nutrition, isn't it? It's social, it's family, it's relations, it's culture, it's identity. And to shield your way from that and to remove yourself from your group of friends, I wouldn't encourage. But I do think we've got choices, don't we? I think we've got options when we go there, and I think we have options to make it more of maybe a potluck dinner or something like that at your home. Just as a little, like, I don't know if this helps anybody at all. My husband and I actually lead a life group through our church, and every Monday we do a potluck. So everybody brings food, and we get together, we gather, we have community, and it's wonderful. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're supportive. You got it. I'm going to move to the last one. Oops, I ate too much and my blood sugar is high. Guess what? You're going to do that. It's going to happen. You're going to make a mistake. It's going to be too much. You had whatever it was, and you have a high blood sugar. What can we do to get it down? Don't feel bad. Do not have guilt. Go for a walk, drink plenty of water. Beautiful. This one is your homework assignment. So if you made a goal, if you have, aspirations to make some changes, I want you to think about some of these problems that you could anticipate. What is a problem you foresee in maybe making this goal achievable? Is it a timing problem? Is it a prepping problem? Is it a social problem? What is the problem, and what are your solutions, and what can you choose to do? All right, that's your homework for today. Oh, I keep doing that. Okay, you can always go back to making goals, but ultimately, you guys have completed today's class. I'm so proud of you. Yay! And to the Phillipsburg people, good for you guys too. I hope you guys have found this informative, educational, fun, sort of funny at times, but more than anything, gave you the tools and knowledge you need to kind of manage your diabetes better. So, I'm not sure what's on. Oh, that is the clinic number for the clinic I work at. So you can ask for me if you want to. Yes.
Also, we have certificates of
Yes.
completion.
Yes.
If you're trying to get continuing education or run it for your health insurance.
Do you guys want this? Yeah, some people need it for their health insurance. Should I sign? I probably should sign. I can do that.
I sign all of them. So you can
Sometimes I play graduation music and I forgot about that. Shoot. I know. I forgot about. Do you want this?
Yeah, I'll take one. Hey, do they have a clinic like yours in Amarillo?
You know what? I am not aware. I think they have an endocrinologist in Amarillo. Oh, yay! Oh, that's so wonderful. Look at them. Oh, that's wonderful. Do you guys want this? Yeah.
I'm gonna send it in for my license.
Definitely.